So far, literally nothing has happened. And that's supposed to be scary. Like, nothing's happened. I thought it was gonna be interesting. Like, nothing has really happened. He doesn't look convincing at all. They call it the monster that walks, and nothing. He didn't walk.
Cinematic Fantastic.
Batu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
By a werewolf and lives, becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
It was a dark and stormy night. The wind fell in torrents, or rather the rain, except at occasional intervals, when it was checked by a violent gust of wind, which swept up the streets. For it's in the UK our episode lies, rattling along the housetops and fiercely agitating the scantly flame of the lamps that struggled against the darkness. Welcome to episode 15 of Cinematic Fantastic.
Wow.
Doesn't it give you chills?
It does, kind of. Where did you get that from?
I got it from, it's the most cliched opener in the entire...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's actually there's some books that used to do that, and there's actually a contest online where they do that kind of style, and you have to write like a couple sentences in that style just to kind of be real over the top.
And why am I reading this? It's because we're doing a really, really bad story called The Monster Walks.
Let me explain why we did this one. Okay, first off, I want to apologize vociferously. No, it's fine. It's good to find out what you like as well as what you don't. So anyway, I was looking in the list of movies from the 1930s that were like horror or mystery or something like that. And I didn't recognize this one, but I was like, maybe it's one with, maybe it has Lon Chaney Jr. in it. I didn't see it. Or maybe it has somebody that we know. And it came out in 1932. It's called The Monster Walks. And lo and behold, as I started watching this, I noticed that I didn't recognize anybody in this really. And my jaw was kind of dropped like, oh, this is what we're doing. I see.
This is our very first terrible movie we've done on this podcast.
Well, okay. And as we review this movie, I can probably see maybe 1.5 things that are notable about this movie. Kind of.
So, because it was a stinker of a movie, Dad decided that he would rather cleanse his eyeballs with bleach. That is, the movie created by James Whale. It's a Universal movie, and it's got the exact same premise, and quite literally called The Old Dark House. And today we're going to be trying to do both. Very ambitious, but...
Very ambitious. I agree, yeah. So, okay. So first off, it's not the exact same premise, but it does have some tropes and some cliches. I didn't know how widespread it was because I was only familiar with a couple of these types of movies. IMDb calls them old dark house movies, but of course the movie that we're doing, that we watched after the Monster Walks was called The Old Dark House, and I've seen it once, and I thought it was pretty good. I'd never heard of it until I was looking through some Universal movies, and I was like, oh, James Whale, oh, he did Frankenstein, he did The Invisible Man, he did The Bride of Frankenstein. Well, let's give it a shot. And I watched it on my own, I think years ago, and I was impressed with it of different aspects of it, and I like it even better now. But here's the thing: The Old Dark House, as far as I can tell, has some particular tropes in it. Like, there's kind of a old Gothic mansion or house. It's kind of rickety-ish. There's maybe an old family that lives there or used to live there. There's a mystery of some sort. There might be ghosts or someone pretending to be a ghost. There's storms, maybe, or also there's a couple of them that do like a winter, which I think those are cool. A winter theme where it's like snowy outside. And people are trapped often in this house for some reason. So there's a lot of these movies on IMDb. Some of the ones that I actually know would be the now. Unfortunately, I know The Monster Walks now. Great. But there's another one that I would say almost that if you were to see this movie, and I'll let you know what it is called. It's called The Cat and the Canary, and it came out in 1927, just as talkies were getting started. Talking pictures are started, and The Cat and the Canary. Not only does it share, it's about the same plot, kind of, but it's better done and it's more creative. And it also shares an actress that's in this movie, and she does a way better job in that movie than she does in this one. And her name is Martha Maddox. She plays the Mrs. Krug in the Monster Walks, William. And in this other movie, she plays this old lady, kind of a similar character, but she does a better job with it. And everything's really off. It's called The Cat and the Canary. It's pretty good. It got remade, I think, again, either in the 40s or something. Don't quote me on that. But it has Bob Hope in it, and Bob Hope was a famous comedian actor. Anyway, I've gone on for quite a while,
and we need to give our summary. However, we are gonna try our very best to keep this production segment spoiler safe because, mystery films, have their mysteries. And if you don't want to be spoiled, we'll try our best for this segment and this segment only. And the plot, all heck loose, we'll spoil everything. And, you should probably go watch the movie right before you do the plot segment. And you'll enjoy it, and it'll be a spoiler-free environment. And then you'll come back, and then we'll be able to do our podcast.
And you said watch these movies. William, I'd like to say to our listeners that, yes, you can see The Old Dark House in really good quality.
However, The Monster Walks, no one cared about that movie, obviously, so it's in terrible quality. And all of our clips will therefore be in terrible quality. And it's also in public domain. So what we're going to do is, how we put the links to go watch it on our blog post. For The Monster Walks, we will just have a YouTube link.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't have to spend money for it. I mean, it's on Amazon somewhere for like $7 or so. So that, if you really want to, it's not worth it.
If you're gonna buy a movie, buy a good copy of The Old Dark House, because especially there's actually commentary by one of the actresses that's in The Old Dark House.
Gloria Stewart, yes.
Many people don't know who she is if you don't know, but when we get to talking about her in a little bit, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I know her. Even younger viewers will, if they're old enough to watch a really, really, really popular mega blockbuster. She was in a movie that's very famous. It was probably it made the most money of any movie since, up till then. I think Avatar beat it, and then Endgame, I think, maybe beat it. But don't quote me on that. But when we get to that, we'll let you know what movie we're talking about. Anyway, she's got a commentary on there, and a lot of the little tidbits that we can tell you about the movie The Old Dark House, she actually reveals.
Upon which we're not going to be able to cover, unfortunately, but you can go take a look at that. It'll be a pretty good watch. So, to summarize both the movies, the first one, for spoiler-free summary, by the way.
Do your best.
Monster Walks, it involves a bunch of people coming together in a house. You've got Ruth Earlton, Dr. Ted Carver, you got Ruth's Uncle Robert, you got Mrs. Krug, and a guy named Hans, and they all come together. They're all like a family, and so Ruth's father died, and his estate is going to be divided. So the movie revolves around the mystery concerning this and a ginormous ape.
Okay, he's He's ginormous on the posters.
He's ginormous in quotations.
Yeah, he's just kind of a slightly larger than normal chimpanzee.
Yeah, one of the things about this movie is that quite literally all the advertising and the title is false. It's very much false. The ape does nothing. That is one spoiler we'll give you. The ape literally does nothing. The ape just sits there and jumps. The movie has a different villain.
Yes.
But they draw people in with the ape craze that happened around the 1930s. Everyone in the horror space was so crazy about apes that it's just not a joke. The second movie involves the same kind of thing happening where we have a Philip Waverton, his wife Margaret, and their friend Roger. They're all lost while driving at night in a very heavy storm, and they come upon an old house where they received shelter by a Horace Femme and his sister Rebecca. The movie revolves around discovering the history of the Femme family. It's pretty interesting.
And their dysfunction. I told my wife it's the wettest movie since Waterworld, but it's sopping wet out there. But they just want some shelter, and they want to get next to a nice warm fire and just hang out there. But oh no,
there are complications.
Complications, mystery. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get our reception out of the way. So, what did you think about the monster walks?
Wow. All right. I thought that, I didn't know these actors before. I didn't look into the history of what kind of experience they had acting.
Or the company behind the picture as well.
Or the company. I didn't look up the company behind the picture. I know it's Astor. I learned later that they do a lot of
B-movies.
Astor was a Poverty Row company, which I think we talked about Poverty Row at one point.
We've talked about the Great Depression before, and it's a wonder how movies from people like Universal and all the big companies manage to survive. But there are a ton of other companies, like millions of others, that are just under the water that the rain has caused in this movie.
Yeah, the metaphorical economic rain. So here's the thing. You said you wondered why Universal survived. Actually, the fact that there was the Depression is the reason why they somewhat survived. Because people were willing to, and we'll talk about this when we get to King Kong, it's pure escapism. These movies showed them something. They didn't have TV, so they didn't have something to go watch. A lot of times, like a TV show or whatever will come out on Disney Plus or Netflix or whatever, and people will just be like, this is appointment viewing. I have to make an appointment. I have to sit down and binge this whole thing.
I have to go binge Obi-Wan Kenobi and watch Princess Leia teeter-totter all over while people are chasing her slowly. Like, yeah, personally, everything that Disney creates on since Book of Boba Fett kind of stank, and I feel like Obi-Wan Kenobi is probably gonna stink as well. But I mean,
wow, hot takes.
Hot take, but I mean, seriously, probably watch all the movies, watch Clone Wars. We'll watch all the movies except for, up until Last Jedi. Obviously.
Yeah.
And then anything after that came out in 2019 and above, you should probably just realize it's probably going to be less quality.
All right, so
anyway,
yeah.
Don't sue us, House of Mouse, please.
Yeah, that was a nice little side trip, but he's right. We have so much content out there, but for something like this, people didn't have this kind of content. So when something came out that was amazing, they would instead of spending their money on a meal, they would go watch the movie, and they'd be like, well, I don't have to eat supper tonight. I'm gonna go
watch someone eat supper on TV. Or rather not TV, at the movie theater. I'm gonna go to movie theater, and I'm gonna watch someone eat food, and I'm gonna sit hungrily. That is a waste of your time.
Well, if you're okay, so William, there definitely is some food eating in the old dark house. A famous line. I didn't know it was this famous of a line, but "have a potato" is just, you're going to be quoting. Anyway, we'll talk about that during the plot. So back to this. People during the Great Depression wanted to get away from the reminder of how horrible life was at the time, and so they went to go watch movies. And these movies were the ones that were good. They did really well. The ones that were okay, they still got something. Enough to keep them afloat, because a lot of these movies, like The Monster Walks, were very low budget. I'm talking like, if you want to talk about what kind of production design they had maybe a couple stages, a couple bedrooms, right? Very generic looking bedrooms, a living room, maybe a kitchen. They had one little nothing of a scene outside with the car. It's indicative of these Poverty Row movies is that there's a lot of low budget movies that come out nowadays, like on Sci-Fi Channel and stuff like that, or even that somebody has just filmed on an old camcorder they had around and somehow got it onto Amazon. I would say that's very close to what these are. These kind of movies.
Although there are some seriously treated experimental films that were probably on a camcorder.
Yeah, exactly.
Famously, there was one film called Paint Drying, and you can obviously tell what that entails.
Wow,
it's just someone with a, I don't know, $10 camera with paint drying for 2 days straight.
Or that movie Sleep, where it's just watching somebody sleep for like 8 hours. So, yeah, good luck with that. So, but yeah, I understand that. But with this kind of movie, as far as I could tell, when I watched these people acting, okay, what I got out of this is I saw them acting and went, wow, that's the take you're going with? And it reminded me, it was bad acting, but it wasn't so bad that I could make fun of it. I don't know. There's some bad movies I've seen, William, and they're so earnest about what they're doing. They believe that they're acting really well, and they're maybe overacting or something, and that's what makes it so bad it's good. This movie was just so bad it's bad. The acting's not great. The only two performances to me that stood out is Hans Krug, played by Misha Auer, who you kind of see that he's trying, but his later roles were more comedic, and that's where he got most of his acclaim. I think he was meant to be comedic. I think, when God creates somebody and says, oh, well, this person's meant to do something, he was meant to be comedic, and he was not meant to be serious. It did not ring true to me. But this other actor, he's credited as Sleep and Eat, and his real name is Willie Best. We'll talk about him. And he
played
the cast.
Exodus in this film, and he also had some personality to him.
Oh, he definitely did.
I do agree with that.
He was funny, but for the wrong reasons. He was playing a very racial stereotype, very lazy, scared of ghosts, scared of spooks. He does play that kind of character type, of a servant or a chauffeur or a butler or something like that, scared of spooks. He plays that kind of character again in The Ghost Breakers with Bob Hope, and another ghost movie that I think has Bela Lugosi in it. Don't quote me on that. I'm just remembering off the top of my head. But he plays a lot of these character types again and again. But look, he's the only one who's actually pulling off. They're supposed to be funny, but he's at least pulling them off. They kind of hit with a little bit of an oof because of the implications of what he's playing. But at least he's trying.
But yeah, I do agree with that. The acting in this movie overall, everyone is very stale. They're kind of over the top, and nobody has any personality, well, except for Hans and Exodus. But
I thought they were under the top. You said over the top? I thought they were like wooden...
over the top sometimes. Like,
okay,
where there's the one dude, and he is in a wheelchair, and he's just, like, wailing over. He's like, oh, I'm so disabled. I can't come and hug you or something. And I'm just like, would you please shut up, man? Anyway.
Oh, if I were not so helpless. If my shrunken body could lift you up and comfort you.
Could you shut up, please? I'm not being ableist. I'm just.
Well, yeah. If you watch this movie, you'll understand what William is talking about. Don't say anything about William. Watch the movie, you'll understand. Because the dude, he mentions he's disabled so many times, but it ends up, I think that he's covering for something. But that will be revealed when we talk about the plot. But anyway.
Anyway, I also thought that, again, it's very obvious. It's very slow, like many silent movies, but like they were kind of clinging on to that. And it wasn't very enjoyable, and it was very little suspenseful as well.
Did you kind of figure out the plot of what they were? I think when we watched it together,
I made up much better plots than what they had.
In your brain, you kind of made up what you thought was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
I came up with tons of stuff much better, and it's just like writing doesn't have a budget. All you have to do is just write something good.
Yeah. And honestly, William, watching it with you was probably the only thing that made it bearable.
And also my commentary, because I was commentating on the Monster Walks a lot more than I did the Old Dark House, because I wasn't into the movie as much. And so the Old Dark House, I'm just sitting there and watching it with, I don't know, gotta slurp up some spit with my jaw open, whatever.
Yeah, and I think we were both incredulous. We were kind of like, what? What is he, what's the plot? What is he doing? Why is he doing that?
I was constantly just like, nothing's happening. We've literally had not very much happening. I do appreciate when someone takes their time and has that atmosphere, but it went a little bit too far in this movie. And also, I do agree the sets are very cramped, very much like a stage play. Another thing that was like a stage play, I did enjoy this factor a little bit, but only for one little bit of it.
Okay.
So, in this movie, the soundscape of the rain, the grandfather clock, everything, they're like metal sheets, bangs, and bells. And this is very cheap stage play tactics, but I like the concept of a metallic soundscape. That's a really cool idea. Is like maybe the way you see the world is fabricated. Maybe it's like the Matrix or something. Who knows? There's tons of stuff you could do with just that concept.
I think that
I'm reading into it too much, but
you are. You're kind of giving it more genius credit than it really has, and I think you're being too kind.
Yeah, but it's overall it's extremely cheap, very cliche, definitely a B movie.
Yeah, and honestly, also, I mean, some people have even that I've read reviews of, they said, hey, you got to give it credit because a lot of these things that we say are cliche is they were kind of being invented on screen at this time.
Or they're like, it's just the 1930s. That's how it was back then. And I'm like, well, look at all of this.
Right. Look at Frankenstein.
Look at the White Zombie. That was not as good, but still better.
Even White Zombie, there was a lot of, and even the production quality of the castle and all that and stuff you can look at.
I mean, we've covered so much stuff from 1932 lately, and we're going to be on that for a while, that it's just like there's so much variation in it, that it's just like how you need to get a bigger picture. A motion picture. Anyway.
Well, and like you said, when somebody says, they cannot give the excuse that, it was the 30s. I know that there's a variety, but and I know that Universal could pump more money and better. Yeah, I have to say though, if the Monster Walks had the money that the Old Dark House had, and it had the cast, the Chef's Kiss, wonderful cast. It even had some actors that I wasn't familiar with, There's a couple actors I didn't know, and I really liked their performances. I was reminded about how good they were.
Yeah, so now that we're transitioning to our reception of the Old Dark House, I will say my reception is, like, overall, it is definitely much better than the Monster Walks, obviously, but I like that they did more with the house dynamic, like with the history, rather than it's just an unimportant collective space with maybe some secret passageways as we see in the Old Dark House. But The story, it moves so much better than the other movie, and it's tons more suspenseful. And everyone actually has personality and charm. I could even name their personalities. Hold on, we have a nervous vulture-like man. We have a deaf, religious old lady. We have a very American stage girl. We have a boisterous moneymaker, and a cynical, debonair gentleman that is,
Oh, Mr. Waverton, what shall I do? I wanted to go to Shrewsbury, but they took me on to Crewe.
I don't remember his name, but see, you could name them. The monster walks, you couldn't name them at all.
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to. I mean, I kind of vaguely remember some of the stuff, some of the people. Hans is very. I can remember things about him. Also, Sleep and Eat, but nobody else sticks out to me. And honestly, a lot of it is just the skill of the actors and what they have to work with. The lighting, the quality was so much.
Especially with the Universal film, it's just immensely fascinating.
Wow. Even Universal B movies are still pretty good, and when they're so bad, they're actually so bad they're good.
But the Monster Walks definitely wasn't dated so bad it's good, really.
No, I wish it was. I almost wish it was, because then I could have fun making fun of it. Now I just feel like
It's just really stale.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
You can have a very atmospheric, slower movie where, you build up all of who the people are and all that stuff like it kind of tries to do. But there's definitely better ways you can do it. The Old Dark House doesn't do so much as that, but it's definitely comparable.
There are parts where the Old Dark House feels like it's moving slow, but it's taking its time. My eyes were glued to the screen.
It's still captivating, though.
The
Monster Walks is just, it's not that captivating at all.
If somebody has heard of Frankenstein, heard of the Wolfman, they've heard of Invisible Man, they've heard of all those other Universal things, and they may have not seen them in years, I would have to say, you can find it on YouTube if you look. You can probably see it better on a Blu-ray or DVD, but look, if you really are hard up to watch a good movie that you've never seen before that's older, and you want to give it a shot, you can't go wrong with The Old Dark House. I mean, even, you said some other movie did it better. The Cat and the Canary did the Monster Walks better. Okay, let me tell you. It's got a weird family. The Cat and the Canary has a gathering for a reading of a will in an old dark house during a rainstorm. It's got secret passages. And did I say weird family? So it is kind of a combo between some of the old dark house elements and the Monster Walks elements. So it's kind of like, yeah, but Cat and Canary was years earlier and did a way better job. So I think the reason I wanted to show you the Old Dark House was I was like, here's a movie that did it in a very bad way. Here's a movie that's like
much better, indeed. So let's jump into the production of the Old Dark House. We don't have too much on the production of the Monster Walks.
We do know. We can say one interesting thing about the production. We'll go into the cast of the Monster Walks in a minute, but the only interesting thing I could find out about the production, other than the fact they did it for such a low budget, was it was directed by Frank Strayer, and Frank Strayer, we're going to see him again in the next movie that we do called The Vampire Bat. Which came out in 1933. And The Vampire Bat stars Lionel Atwill, who we'll see quite a bit in Universal movies, and old favorite, our old friend Dwight Fry.
Yeah, except it's missing a cheeseburger. Anyway.
Right. Right, exactly.
Right, anyway.
A Dwight Fry performance is like a nice bowl of chicken noodle soup. It warms you to the core.
So, the Old Dark House.
Yes.
It starts out with Carl Laemmle Jr. as always. He's the owner of Universal at this point. He got the screenwriter Ben Levy from England after being impressed with his screenplay for a movie called Waterloo Bridge, 1931.
Yeah.
And it was also directed by James Whale. And this movie was directed by James Welles as Whale.
As Whale. Yeah, and just to remind the viewers, this is James Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, The Old Dark House, Whale. So this guy, he knows his...
I would like to make a sequel to The Old Dark House called The Old Dark House Whale. So it would be like the exact same, but there would be a whale. But probably at this time, there'd probably be whaling, unfortunately. It's a heavy topic, but it would probably end with the whale's murder.
Yes.
At sea.
Yeah.
And they get his oil to put in the lamps that finish off the movie. And then he would walk all the way over to Paris and take part in the Phantom of the Opera in 1925. Go watch that movie. We also did a podcast episode on it a while back. It's pretty cool. But there's a mysterious lantern man. That is his secret. He got it from the whale oil from the sequel to The Old Dark House. Anyway.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, and he was also in Nosferatu 1. Anyway. Levy had to do some work on his Paramount film that he was doing, and then he went to Universal, and he started on The Old Dark House. And it's based on a novel from 1927 called Benighted, and that's knighted without a K.
Right.
That would be the perfect Camelot story, Benighted. Anyway,
right.
It's by J.B. Priestley.
Priestley.
E.Y.
Yeah.
And it was about post-World War I disillusionment, which has nothing to do with this movie. They don't even mention it, but The Old Dark House follows the original plot while adding levels of comedy, reportedly. So, the reception of the movie that people had in the U.S., two people, there's the Variety and the Hollywood Filmograph. They gave the film negative reviews. Variety called it somewhat inane, and overall very kind of negative. All 9 of the New York City daily newspapers did give the film positive reviews.
Yes.
And the Times praised it, and they said, there's a wealth of talent in this production. Like Frankenstein, it had the advantage of James Whale's extraordinary directing ability. People really like James Whale.
They did. I would agree with that. I think Variety and the Hollywood Filmograph, they got those reviews wrong. I don't agree with those at all.
They don't have a variety in their opinions.
No.
Anyway, so the film had good business at the box office in its first week, but then it suffered through negative word of mouth in its second and third weeks. And it did perform way better in the United Kingdom, though. It broke house records at the Capitol Theatre in London. So people liked it in the country that it takes place in, but anyway. So apparently in 1957, Universal lost the rights to the story, and a remake was released in 1963. It was directed by William Castle, and it was co-produced with Hammer Film Productions, because they didn't renew their contracts or whatever and stuff, and so they lost the rights. For many years, the original version was considered a lost film, and it had a tremendous reputation as one of the preeminent gothic horror films. It is a very gothic horror, but...
You mentioned Hammer Films, and I think after this season, I am planning on introducing some Hammer horror films, at least some of the earlier ones, before they started getting a little too... Raunchy. But the early Hammer horror movies will be interesting because we're going to be covering Universal movies, like we did The Mummy and Dracula and Frankenstein, and also a werewolf movie is coming up. And then when we get to the Hammer stuff, you're going to see a different take on it. Maybe one that's a little bit more shocking, a little bit more. So we're going to do some Hammer movies. By the way, William, I saw the trailer to the Old Dark House 1963 version, and it's a little more goofy.
Why don't you drop in? Sometime.
May I introduce a friend of Casper's, Mr. Pendrell?
Such a surprise to find he had a friend. We're having you for dinner. Delicious.
We should warn you that the Femme family have some very killing habits. Well, there's Aunt Agatha, who loved knitting, surrounded by a host of wool-gathering relatives. Something or someone must have needled her.
Must have been murder. She always knitted so carefully.
Also in the old dark house, you'll find Casper and Jasper. And dead or alive, they look the same. Tom was just a visiting American who came by accident. And by accident, he was still alive. Remember, we are the sole agents for this desirable property. An exclusive residence that's murder to run.
I mean, like horror comedy, but still goofy. And honestly, it doesn't compare in my mind to the creepy factor of the old dark house 1932.
But long story short, they found the film negative in their archives, and so they duplicated it, restored it, and now we have it. And modern reception is, they've liked it way more than the reviews in 1932.
Oh yeah, it's a cult classic, and honestly, this movie looks fantastic.
Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes, they gave it 85 out of 10. Most reviewers positive, and also it's got a 96% tomato meter. That's awesome. And also, we have Ali Catterthal of Channel 4, who reports that it was impressively atmospheric and hilariously grim. And Carl Williams of AllMovie, the film database, also wrote, by the 1960s, it had attained a Grail-like status among fans of Whale, and the old dark house came to be considered a cult gem, part of the renewal of interest in Whale's talents many years after his creative peak.
I agree.
Pretty cool. I'm glad we still have the film.
Yeah, we do. And you know what? There are some movies that came out in the 30s that were still good, but did not get the treatment this movie did. The work they did on it, it looks fantastic. As far, I mean the quality is just great. I was just looking at, you know, everybody's faces. You can see every crease and line and every emotion they're trying to evoke. Hey, you know, anybody out there that's like, I've never seen the old dark house, but I do like old movies, you owe it to yourself to see this movie. There are some really good movies in this subgenre. Sometimes you look at it and just go, that looks really good.
I guess there are some favoritism in Universal production restoration because obviously they're a big company. They don't want to lose any of their properties. So
That's true. I agree.
Like, what would a world be like where we lost Frankenstein and we lost Dracula and we lost literally a ton of movies, and it's just like the film, we didn't even know that films existed, so we're like, the film started, instead of being in like 1900 with The Trip to the Moon, it was like 1960 or something. That would be a wacky world, but we're getting off topic.
Well, you know, if you think about it, you know, there's that Lon Chaney movie, London After Midnight, where we only have like photos of Lon Chaney in the makeup. And he played a vampire, and we don't have that movie. It's lost to time. So if you think about it, what if we just had Bela Lugosi looking like Dracula, and we didn't have that movie? A lot of movies would not be here if not for the inspiration of some of those. But that was the reception that the people of the time had, and modern people had of that movie. It was okay. I do know this from the commentary on the DVD. I do know that Gloria Stewart said that the whole scene at the very beginning where they're driving the car, where the Wavertons and the other guy, they're driving through mud and rain,
and they did not enjoy it.
But but she kind of secretly liked it. But also she never wanted to complain because she was very new to some of these bigger pictures, and
but everyone else did.
Yeah, but she was like, I don't want to complain because I don't want to be known as a complainer.
They complained a lot all evening about the conditions. It being my first location shot and my second movie, I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was such fun, and I really enjoyed it. I think today that this would have been a process shot. I don't think that the actors would have had to go through the rain and the wind and the cold. And the wet. We were sopping wet.
But here's the thing, though. All that scene, that was all done with, special. She said they had wind machines, rain machines. They had pulled countless pounds of mud in to build this kind of countryside and just slosh it. And the landslide part right there, that's all real. All of that is. The only thing that's not real is when they go up to the house. The only thing that's real about that house that they drive up to is the front. All the inside, the interiors of the house is on a separate stage. So everything inside the house is a separate set. But what a set it is.
One thing we can say about is Karloff is that Karloff had a quarrel on set with James Whale, and they just couldn't work with each other anymore, so they decided, I'm not going to work with you anymore. When The Invisible Man was in development, he, instead of choosing Karloff, he chose Claude Rains. But that's kind of a thankful thing, because so much Karloff saturation in the universal space, that's just like, maybe it's kind of a breather. I do kind of agree that would be a breather.
And here's the thing, we do know what the Invisible Man, Griffin, we know what he sounds like in The Invisible Man, and now I'm trying to think of Karloff's kind of Grinch voice as that character, and I like Claude Rains better. He's very manic in that role, and very, very easily agitated, and I think it's a better choice. But remember that in the old dark house, when they had that quarrel, they were passing notes. Like, he would have a note that said, I want you to do this, and he would pass it to another actor, and the actor would
they wouldn't even speak to each other.
No, the other actors passed messages back and forth. And how do you get anything done by doing that? How did they get anything done when James Whale directed him in Bride of Frankenstein? I mean, that they're on set, all the time. How do you get a good? But he had a good performance in. I really liked his performance in Bride of Frankenstein, which is coming up. So we have to we have to wait till next season for that one. But that's going to be great. We're going to have two great, really good Frankenstein movies for our first two seasons.
So then we get to Melvin Douglas as Penderell, and he was in the 1930s a very suave leading man, and he was in a couple of things, and he did appear in the last few years of his life, many supernatural stories involving ghosts. Oh, Douglas, he also shared top billing with Boris Karloff and Charles Laughton for this film, The Old Dark House, and he's also going to be in The Vampire Bat, and he also has 2 stars on the Hollywood of Fame for movie and television. So there were a ton of people on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Maybe go visit that, and then you can find all sorts of good people there.
Yeah, one thing we did notice, and I guess we're going to mention it in the plot part, but there's a part where he's taking it all in stride. This character that Melvin Douglas is playing, Pendrell, they're driving up to the old dark house, and it's raining like cats and dogs and bucketfuls, as they say 2 times in this movie, and he's kind of singing his own version of Singing in the Rain.
And just so you know, the movie didn't come out to 1952, but the song was out in 1929. So good correction.
I did not know that. So we were watching the movie, and you were like, "When did Singing in the Rain come out?" So. Yeah, so that's why
it's
that
like
is.
I knew it came out in 1952, so I was like, so then we go to Raymond Massey, who was Philip Waverton, and he was a Canadian actor, and he was very commanding, stage trained.
Oh yeah, well, wait a minute. He was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor for Abe Lincoln in Illinois, which was a stage play first, but then they made it to a movie. But that was in 1940. That's after he was in this movie.
And he was also, he starred in a movie called Things to Come, which is obviously a film adaptation of H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come, I will read that one, but we might cover that one as well.
Yeah,
very future.
It's on our list. It's on our list to cover. It's either going to be in second or third season.
We get to Lillian Bond, who is Gladys, and Gladys, she was a London person.
She was a London.
She was born in London.
Go.
Made her first professional stage appearance at the age of 14, and she later joined the chorus of the Piccadilly Revels. And she was just on the stage for a ton of her life. Apparently was named a Wampus Baby Star. I think that was also Murders in the Rue Morgue. We saw a person with that. What was her name? She was the person in the bonnet, the cute one.
And the Wampus Baby Stars is basically a deal where this group was going to pick out the next big thing, the it girls, the actresses that were going to be the big thing.
This did include Fay Wray and Gloria Stewart. Speaking of Gloria Stewart, she was also in this film, and she is known for being in James Cameron's Titanic, which was very, very high-grossing film, and she got a Screen Actors Guild Award and Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actress. Wow, she was very supportive to get 2 awards for it. But anyway, was she also in The Invisible Man as well?
She is. She's the love interest of Griffin.
That's awesome. But she did a lot of stuff for Universal Pictures, and this was her early days. And another thing is that she was very outnumbered. Her and Melvyn Douglas were the only British people, actors. And so every time they had tea, they were just like, would you join us for tea? And the American people wouldn't, so they were just sitting there having their tea because...
Okay, so, well, here's the deal. Her and Melvyn Douglas are American. Gloria Stewart and Melvyn Douglas are American, and almost everybody else other than Raymond Massey was British.
Oh,
and
right. Sorry.
Yeah,
Flipped.
They never asked them to join them. But yeah, she had some experiences with the cast. She thought they were kind of snooty. She actually did say that that Karloff was very very cavalier, whatever. He was very whatever to everyone. And I don't like to think about that because I like his performances too much. I like to think of what he was in front of the camera rather than, whenever they yell cut.
So, Ernest Thesiger as Horace Femme, and he was an English stage film actor, and we also note that he was in Bride of Frankenstein as Dr. Septimus Pretorius. That was also obviously directed by James Whale.
He worked on the stage quite a bit. He was in World War I, and he actually got wounded in such a way that his hands could only do certain things. So what he did was he gave himself over to embroidery. Now I know you might think that's a weird
so he sewed
hobby.
Stuff for his friends and stuff.
Yeah, and even though some of the people were saying, oh, it's kind of effeminate to have that kind of occupation, he actually created these little sewing kits for soldiers so that they could embroider, to kind of keep their hands busy and keep their minds calm, and also have something that they could, use as a money-making thing. Because Ernest Thesiger, he actually embroidered so much that he had started guilds and stuff like that. He was expert level hobbyist with this. I mean, this is when, this is like somebody really becoming a great artist.
So he was also in a couple more films, and apparently one of them includes one that's called The Man in the White Suit, starring Alec Guinness, obviously the person who invented Guinness World Records, because...
No!
No, apparently he's actually the old Obi-Wan Kenobi in the OG Star Wars trilogy.
That's right, Mr. Alec Guinness, yes. Another thing to mention is that Ernest Thesiger is not the only artist. I know they're all artists because they're actors. He's not the only artist on this cast list, because Gloria Stewart also in the latter years when she actually faded out of the acting world for a good little bit and became a full-time artist and environmental activist until she was contacted by James Cameron, who wanted her to play the older version of the character known as Rose in Titanic. If anybody who's seen Titanic, they know what I'm talking about. This is the old lady with the heart of the ocean.
Yes, we do. We've talked about Gloria Stewart for so long.
All right.
You know
All
what?
right.
Maybe just let's relegate her to It's a Wonderful Life 2 or something where...
Okay.
You know, James Stewart and Gloria Stewart. Perfect. Anyway.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, we don't have anyone else in good mention, so let's move on to the Monster Walks.
The only actor that I know of in this that went on to do quite a bit of stuff after this
was Misha Auer.
Yes, as Hans Krug.
And he was a really great actor in this movie compared to the other ones. I mean, a little bit less stale, if you know what I mean, but still.
Well, if you've seen some of his stuff in later years, I've seen a couple scenes that he did with in a couple other movies. Like there's a movie called My Man Godfrey. I think that has Carol Lombard in it. That actually is one of his most well-known roles later, and that comes out in 1936, a couple years after this. But he really came into his own later than that, and he had a lot of different roles that people would remember him in. He's a very memorable character actor, but in this movie, he's not very memorable, except for who's that? You know, they get the kind of like, okay, whatever.
But otherwise, we have a bunch of other people. Do they have interesting stuff about them?
Martha Maddox plays Mrs. Krug, and she was in The Cat and the Canary.
And we have Sheldon Lewis as Uncle Robert, who was in a wheelchair. And he apparently also is best remembered for the 1920 Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true. The guy who plays Dr. Ted Clayton, who is very kind of plain, and he's very. You remember how we were talking about that kind of plain male white hero kind of character, like the Harker, like the Jonathan Harker guy from Dracula, that kind of just stiff as a post kind of guy. That's what Ted Clayton appeared to be in this movie, but he had quite a better career later when he would star in tons of westerns. In the 30s, mid-30s, he just switched to westerns and never stopped. And so that's kind of where his importance kind of more lies than in these kind of things.
Let's get down to the best person in this production.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
William Best, that is.
Yes.
Though not really the best at acting.
Well, look, he does okay. Look,
He's
he does okay.
the best at sleeping and eating, as was his name. That's racist, but still.
It is. The thing is, I don't think he wanted to be known as Sleep and Eat. But a lot of these, kind of comedic, quote, comedic black characters during this time were very stereotypical. They were servant type characters.
They didn't know how to read.
Oh, illiterate, lazy, all these different stereotypes. They had those characters play them, and a lot of black actors were like, well, this is the role I get. I'm going to play it.
At least he got credited at all.
Yeah, no, he did have some parts where he was uncredited. There's a lot, and if you want to count how many movies he's been in quite a few. It would rival the amount of movies that some of the other actors in this movie had. Also, it would rival a lot of the parts that some of the actors in the Old Dark House had. But a lot of the parts, unfortunately, they were not leading men. They were not main characters. The ones where he was kind of a supporting or main character, some of the other actors were African American too, and so they were kind of movies that were made especially for, quote, black people at the time. They were like, oh, let's make a movie just for black people. Oh, great, they'll enjoy that. No, it's just kind of like, but it's still, and I'm sure that maybe some people unironically found some of the things he did funny, but I will tell you that some of the lines that they give, I'll call him Willie Best, the lines they give Willie Best in this movie, there's one of them that's so bad and so racist and so unfortunate and oof and yikes that, William, I'm gonna read this line out exactly when we get to the plot, because I don't want to spoil it right now with how bad it is. And you know what line I'm talking about. It's the one at the very end.
Yeah, but he did play a lot of, private chauffeurs, elevator operators, custodians, butlers, valets, waiters, delivery men, launch pilot apparently, room service waiters, and shoe shine boys. It's just...
Yeah.
They do put a lot of them in the working role.
Yeah.
Second-class citizens.
Yeah.
Low-class citizens. It's just... Fortunately, this would get fixed with the civil rights movement in the 1960s, but we're going to have to suffer through racism of all types toward black people, maybe even some Japanese or Chinese people, who knows.
Yes.
Until the 1960s, that's when that was remedied, mostly, completely. But...
Well, let's put it this way. You'll have to see for yourself, but some great strides were made, but it was not a complete thing. When you take great steps forward, you do make some progress, but it's not as much progress as I think a lot of the modern movies do now have. But William, as we get into the 40s, you're probably going to see a lot more roles of people of Asian descent that are going to be a little bit rough. I will tell you, in the 30s and 40s, a lot of characters... Do you remember how Noble Johnson was playing like a Russian Cossack and whatever, and wearing, face makeup to do so? Okay, well, there's a lot of either Arab or Asian parts that actually were played by English or American actors with makeup on.
To make them a stereotype. That's just terrible.
Boris Karloff has done it. He played an Asian at one point. He played an Arab at another. There's a famous English actor that actually portrays I guess he's Tibetan, which is it's an Asian country, in a movie called The Werewolf of London, and that's actually one we're gonna watch, and it's a good movie overall, but yeah, it's pretty rough. We're gonna have to just kind of point out some of those things, but if it's an overall good and well-made movie, I don't think it's going to completely make me hate a movie. If there's some kind of stereotype in there, I just kind of accept it as this was part of the times. I don't excuse it, but...
it isn't a right thing to do then. That's what people say, is it wasn't right then, wasn't right, it isn't right now. And, but we can still see history for what it is and acknowledge it.
Yes, absolutely. And
it was a dark time for humanity, maybe, but
movies were really good, though. But the movies were really good otherwise,
and we need to view it for historical and educational practices.
Yeah, but yeah,
that should be the end of the production.
Yeah, I mean, we've honestly kind of talked about how much the Monster Walks sucked, and we really placed a lot of praise on the Old Dark House. So I think people could probably figure out which one was our favorite. But yeah,
and kind of dissed Kenobi. But the thing is, we haven't seen the entire thing. The third episode came out yesterday, but you can still like it. I kind of like it too. It's just, who knows? They do kind of decline, but that's the thing. Disney are currently trying to populate their service with all sorts of shows. They don't care really much about the properties and upholding the canon or whatever. They want seats on Disney Plus and movies to watch on it. So, but hey, it's okay. It's okay. It's they're just trying to make some money. You can still like it. It's just, big hot take, but
yeah. Well, let's leave it with a hot take. But I will tell you that I really did enjoy watching both of these movies with you. And by the way, dear listeners, I believe we did record our reactions live as we were watching it. So if William would be so kind as to, if we can kind of let our listeners kind of hear some of those as we go through the plot, and also of course, with our, as expected, clips from the movies, we can kind of let you know what our experience was as we talk about the plot and go through that. So that's going to be a first for our podcast. But if William is okay with that, we could do that again sometime, because I really did like that our experiences in watching it and our real genuine reactions were captured, and we can kind of let you see what we heard and experienced.
All right.
Yeah.
Goodbye, listeners. We will join you again for the Monster Walks and the Old Dark House. See you then.
After the break. And we're back from break. Again, this is the 15th episode of Cinematic Fantastic. We've been talking about kind of a dichotomy in this episode. We've been talking about
the Monster Walks and the Old Dark House.
Yes, the bad side of the coin and the good side of the coin. We're talking about a kind of bad example of an old dark house kind of gothic mystery with possibly ghosts or possible monsters, and another one that's example of the same, but it's a better example of this kind of subgenre that a lot of movies, or a lot of production companies were obsessed with making back in the 30s, I think. They did some of those in the 40s too, but I looked up a list of all these movies that had this kind of type, where it had these little couple of like these different tropes or elements or cliches, and there's a lot of them, a good handful. But the Monster Walks it's kind of like one of those meals that you just feel was kind of bland and didn't really fill your stomach.
So what meal do you think would kind of be like that?
Oh man.
So it's like from the things that you eat, just like, I don't know, compare like Burger King, maybe like Taco Bell, maybe like,
I never thought of that. Like,
what do you think is a bland meal from any sort of place?
It felt like a rice cake made out of oatmeal. I'm not. I don't know.
Where did you have that?
I never have.
Well, no, from personal experience, what kind of food have you felt was just bland that you got one time and you remember?
Okay, well, there is a food that's called cream of wheat, and it's kind of bland. It has a slight wheat flavor, but usually you put stuff in it like honey or brown sugar, and it kind of pops it up. That's a very deep question you're asking, but cream of wheat has to be, you kind of caught me by surprise. Cream of wheat is probably the most bland thing that I could eat other than grits. But with grits, you actually put butter and salt in it. It makes it taste pretty good.
So far from trying oatmeal, it is a little bit too soggy for my taste, but it kind of depends on the oatmeal. Like, there's some oatmeal brands that would probably be much better, but you've got to try them.
Yeah, everybody, want to welcome you to Oatmeal Talk, starring William and Jason.
Yeah, oatmeal is both cinematic and fantastic.
And it's this is the podcasting world's most niche that it can possibly get, other than talking about ants for 24 episodes.
But it's like, what would be a good oatmeal topping? What do you think is the blandest oatmeal topping?
This is like the silence of a pin dropping. I tell you what, the most
do you think it would be potato?
Okay, yeah.
Have a potato. Have a potato. Have a potato.
Potato just by itself, without any seasoning, or if it's if it's kind of crisped up. I've had certain kind of potatoes cooked a certain way in grits before, and it's good. But anyway, this question is boggling my mind. Honestly, I'd put this out to our listeners to answer this particular question. It's not movie-based, it's not genre-based, but we want to know, what's the most bland oatmeal you could possibly eat?
The blandest oatmeal and the blandest oatmeal topping.
Yes.
We'll assemble a Q&A. You know what? That's a great idea anyway.
That is a good idea. But speaking of hearing from our listeners, we actually have heard from a listener I won't give his full name because we want to be cool with our peeps. So this message, you want me to read it out to you?
Sure.
This message is from Will S. He's a Will too. So
it's
anyway.
Nice and short.
He says, "Jason, your Curious George impression is right on. Kudos. Signed, the man in the yellow hat." So, yeah, sense of humor there. I think the impression of Curious George that he's referring to was...
in our 10th episode, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was on the tail end of the White Zombie episode when we were about to talk about doing Tarzan next. This is a guess. This is what me and William talked about this before we were going to come back from the break. Where this was, and that's what we think. So if we're wrong, hey, All right, so...
let's jump into it.
Let's get locked into this old dark house and have someone read us a will.
Awesome.
Because now the thing that is dying or that is dead in this movie was the movie itself. So really, we are reading this movie its last rites, and we are putting it in the ground and shoveling some big lumps of dirt on it.
Very vivid.
Very vivid. Okay, let's get started. So this is The Monster Walks. It's directed by Robert Strayer. We will see another Robert Strayer movie, I believe, after this. And I have seen it. And actually, it's not bad. It's a lot better than this. It's almost closer to Universal than this was. We get the opening titles. They're very kind of bland again. The
advertisement is false. They are just drawing in people to ooh, they like apes, they like women, sure, let's chuck them in this movie.
Yeah, there is no scantily clad women in this movie. There is no gorilla that's the size of a woman. It's kind of ridiculous.
And the monster does not walk. That is the point of this movie. He definitely jumps around, but he doesn't walk.
Well,
he does nothing to
No,
the plot.
I disagree with this. I think the monster does walk, and we'll explain who that the monster is not the ape. I'm sorry, spoiler. All right.
Well, okay, speaking of spoilers, as with the nature of mystery films, again, I said this earlier, there will be spoiler territory because there are mysteries to solve. And seriously, we recommend watching this movie. So there will be spoilers from here on out.
Yeah, we recommend you see it just so you can see.
Stop listening to this podcast. Whatever you do.
What are you saying? Pause the podcast, go watch the movie, and come back.
Just run all the way from work to a movie theater or something.
Oh, come on! No, dude, don't do that. Okay, so the first two people we get top billed on this movie are Misha Auer and Martha Maddox. Of course, I think people remember Martha Maddox as playing kind of a similar character in The Cat and the Canary, and like I said, I think William's tired of hearing about The Cat and the Canary, but
it's the cats and the canaries, the birds and the bees, the everything and the nothing.
It's almost a kind of a carbon copy. But anyway, so they're top billed because they're probably the most known in terms of recognition outside of the film. So we start the movie in a scene in the bedroom with a dead body under a sheet while Mrs. Krug, who's played by Martha Maddox, like I mentioned. The other character is Mr. Wilkes, and he's played by Sidney Bracey. They are looking under a sheet at a body, and they look at each other and kind of shake their head. They're kind of sad about it. Okay, so they comment that the head of the house, Dr. Philip Earleton, was alive the night before when she brought him his supper, okay? But he died very suddenly. Hans, Mrs. Krug's son, found the body. Now, as they're leaving the room, they hear an ape, a monkey, or chimp, or whatever he is. He's screaming downstairs, and Mrs. Krug says that the monkey's name is Yogi.
And from this, I was like, what's... Yeah, the name isn't even scary. He doesn't even look that scary. It's just like, yeah, when you think of Yogi, you think, Yogi Bear. Hey, I'm not your average bear. I don't know, wait, I think he has like a New York accent.
It's smarter than the average. He goes, hey, boo, smarter than the average bear. Get the picnic baskets away from the ranger, sir.
I have had it, boo-boo. I'm gonna bust out of here.
That's about this see, another impression. I'm sure to get some messages for that. But no, anyway, Yogi Bear wasn't even around at this time.
But Yogi Bear is not terrifying.
No,
Yogi
it's not.
is also not terrifying. That is my point.
True. But a yogi is a practitioner of yoga, which at the time was a Hindu practice in India where they would, stretch their bodies in certain ways.
And, stretch other people's bodies in all sorts of ways, and maybe they die in the process.
No. This was before yoga was actually popular in Europe and America as a exercise because I'm telling you, the yoga classes are really expensive. But anyway, again, I don't think it's meant to be a scary name. It's just his name. I don't think they would name him like Killer or even Shakma, something like that. That's kind of scary. But no, he's just Yogi.
Why not Project X or like Project Delta?
He's called Project Delta. That's cool. Or give him a name like Epsilon or Omega or something like that. That's kind of creepy.
How about Omega continue with the plot?
Yes, Omega. Mrs. Krug is telling Herbert Wilkes, the Mr. Wilkes guys talked about, that the dead man kept Yogi and has not disposed of him. The dead man had the ape downstairs when he's alive, had the ape downstairs in a cellar in a cage. Then we get a scene with a man in a wheelchair, whom we're going to find out is Robert Earlton. He is the dead man's brother. He's meeting with a slightly foreign young man with black hair and a black outfit. That we figure out that this is Hans, right?
Another thing about this is due to their acting.
Yeah, quote unquote.
He just constantly is saying, oh, my poor oldies, I can't come and hug you, dear. And I'm just like, could you please shut up? Everyone knows you're disabled.
Yeah, he keeps saying, science can't do anything for these legs.
I'm just like, we know.
Yeah, I know that, but I thought, and we'll talk about this as we go, but I thought that was a kind of a way to make you think, well, he's not really disabled, and he's the one who is secretly doing stuff. I don't know. I started looking down the list. I was like, okay, who could the killer be? But again, we'll get to it. So he's asking him, Robert asks Hans, is everything secure? And he says, yes, the cage is strong enough. I put a chain across the door. So we're thinking he's talking about the monkey. So Robert, the man in the wheelchair, asks the other guy, Hans, he says the monkey's screaming because he remembers his dead master and he knows that he's dead in the house. Well, Mr. Wilkes and Mrs. Krug come down the stairs and they discuss that the sudden death of Philip. And then his brother comments that his brother was always the healthy one. And he was the one who was sickly and paralytic. Yeah, there he goes. He's mentioning it. And so Mr. Wilkes says,
but could medical science do nothing for you? No, nothing can ever bring power to these lifeless limbs.
So that's the first and not the only time he's going to be mentioning it. So we hear the monkey scream, and Wilkes is curious. He wants to go see the ape. So Hans takes him down there to see him. The cage is really small. Okay, so I know that at the time people were like, "Oh, well, it's just an animal, whatever." But
PETA would be on this movie
yes, they would in a heartbeat. That's the reason why a lot of movies later care so much about animals is because you're bringing an animal into the situation. You've trained them. Are you really paying them what they're worth? What are you giving them? And here they are giving you their best performance as an animal. And what are you providing them except maybe pain? In this case, he's in a really small cage, tight quarters, right? All right, so I felt bad for him because it's a real chimpanzee. It's not like the Murders in the Rue Morgue where it was Charles Gimora who was in the gorilla costume. I mean, you're paying an actor. You're like, "Are you comfortable, Charles?" And he's like, "Fine."
It's like, no, this is a real monkey.
Yeah. Now, all he can do is jump up and down. I don't know if that's supposed to look scary because it just kind of looks silly / sad. So Hans says that Yogi was the doctor's favorite. He would let him have the run of the house, and he knows every inch of the house, which is a kind of... See, they have these little bits that they drop out there. This is one of them. They mention later that the house has lots of secret passages and hidden stuff. So you're led to believe that the monkey knows all those hidden passages, and that's how he's getting around and doing some of the nonsense that he gets up to.
But as we see, this is false.
Yeah. So everybody is okay with the ape, except for the doctor's daughter, Ruth. The monkey was always jealous of Ruth. Ruth had left when she was younger, which I guess she had her own reasons. So she's coming back tonight because they're going to read the will of the dead doctor, Philip Earlton. So all through the scene, we see little momentary flashes outside, and we hear these metal sheet thunder sound effects.
Right, yeah.
The sound effects, they're very stagey. The sound effects in Old Dark House might even be pre-recorded, but they sound better.
But the thing is, it's just like, it's an interesting concept, though.
Yeah, but the Monster Walks is on a shoestring budget. It's a Poverty Row feature. I mean, it's not like we can expect too much more of it. But even if you have a low budget, you should be able to get some good acting out of your players. I mean,
As we said, writing is free. It doesn't have a budget.
That's true. That's true.
But what does have a budget is literally needing a sheet of metal to do everything. I mean, like,
Right.
come on. One time you sound like the TARDIS.
It did sound like a TARDIS a little bit, yeah.
Just like, it brought me out of it a bit.
It did. So the storm's getting worse, and Wilkes, who I think is a benefactor, but he's asked to stay the night. He's going to be reading the will and kind of executing the will. Mrs. Krug says that she could put Wilkes up in the guest room, but Robert, the guy in the wheelchair, he says that they should just put him in another room away from that guest room. Again, these are like little mystery things that make you go, okay, he's putting him in another room for some reason. I see when somebody says this is a mystery, then you start listening to everything everybody says, and you're like, oh, that's it, and none of it went anywhere. And it's just, you're trying to find anything at all to latch onto in this movie to make it interesting for you, and it didn't quite scratch that itch. Okay, so the monkey is getting upset because somehow he knows somebody's arriving that he knows. How he can smell Ruth coming down the street, I have no idea. So Ruth and her fiance Ted Clayton come in. Ruth has been told that her father has died, and she's returning to find out what's going to be done with the estate. So as soon as she goes in the door, she goes right to her Uncle Robert and just starts collapsing on the floor next to him, starts crying. He tries to comfort her, and he says, if I were not so helpless and I had not such a shrunken body, I could hold and comfort you too.
It's just like, shut up already, we know.
Yeah, Hans is watching, and he's kind of sneering a little bit. I thought that maybe he thinks that Robert's not really a helpless paralytic or something. I suspected that, but we'll see if I was right. Hint, hint. So Hans overhears Ruth saying she wishes she had one more day with her dad, and Uncle Robert says, let me take his place in your heart.
To kind of fill that void.
That's true. He's kind of filling. But honestly, it's all an act. Later on you find out it's all an act because he sounds like he cares, but then once you find out there's a secret scheme, you kind of get wise to it. So
hey, Dad.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a top couple weirdest lines in this movie?
Okay, I have my votes for some of the weirdest lines. I want to hear from you and see if they're the same. Let's do it toward the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ruth hears the ape Yogi going a little crazy. I was going to say going ape, but that's just too much. Goes a little crazy downstairs. He's screaming, and she's frightened. They let her know the ape is securely caged, so shouldn't have to worry. She introduces her fiancé, Ted. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Just get ready, guys. We go to a scene outside with the car where the chauffeur named Exodus, he's a black gentleman, right? He's played by Willie Best, who was also known by his stage name, his really not controversial name at all of Sleep and Eat. It's a stereotypically lazy name. It's, when I was watching it and I saw that name, I was like, no, wait a minute. Are they trying to say that he's so lazy that all he does is just sleep and eat? That's the worst. I get upset. Anyway, he's getting out Mrs. Ruth's luggage. And he's heard the scream, right? And Hans Krug comes out to him and says that the scream is from Yogi. Of course, he doesn't tell him what Yogi is, right? So Exodus doesn't know Yogi's an ape. And he says, that man must be in misery. And then when Exodus hears a dead man's in the house, he goes, he doesn't want to go in. So it's a stereotype of these kind of characters that black people, sometimes would play, or they would write for them. I don't know. Somebody who's scared of ghosts or scared of spooks. We got a long way to go with getting really solid roles that are not mean and belittling like this role was. So anyway, Ruth and Mrs. Krug go upstairs to see Ruth's father lying in repose. Of course he's dead, right? And we also find out that Dr. Clayton, Dr. Ted, the fiance, he is familiar with that Dr. Earlton worked in Darwinian theory, that experiment. So they set Ruth up in her old childhood room across from her father's room, which you'll find interesting for different reasons.
And then we have a scheme set up, whereupon Hans is going to reveal that Dr. Earlton is dead, or now that he's dead, the truth should be told that he is her son.
Well, he's Robert's Robert, the man in the wheelchair, his son.
Robert's and Mrs. Krug's son.
Yeah.
And then Mrs. Krug is like, wait a little bit until he reads the will. We may be rich. And I was kind of a bit more excited for this because I was like, ooh, there's going to be a whole thing with it. And seriously, I can invent better things than the people who wrote this
honestly,
movie.
yeah, when we watched this movie, we were so kind of bored. I mean, the fact there was no music, the blocking was bad, and the acting was very flat. We were watching this, we were trying to latch on to any little bit of intrigue we possibly could. And when someone was scheming, we were like, a scheme?
Our expectations, or rather mine, mostly was lowered to the floor, so I guess.
Business is picking up, as I've heard some people say. So
they read the will.
Ruth's fiance wants to stay the night in the inn, because it's a family matter. But she says, no, you need to stay here. Of course, that means that you gotta have everybody have a reason to stay in the house. I mean, the storm is not so bad. I mean, in the old dark house, which we'll get to later, I mean, the storm is definitely a reason for everybody to stay in one location. But this one, it's kind of like they make up reasons for people to just stay there.
Well, Exodus, he could probably deal with the rain because, as he said, he would go 11 miles in the rain. It's a pleasant walk.
Nonsense. You can't walk to the village in this storm. It's 11 miles. That's just a pleasant walk.
It's a pleasant walk for Usain Bolt, not you, Exodus.
Right. I'm just saying 11 miles. But it's just kind of kooky because he's like...
Maybe he is Usain Bolt in the past. I don't even know.
Well,
time travel.
Usain Bolt is fast enough to time travel.
See, have a subplot where we have Exodus is secretly Usain Bolt and he traveled into the past.
See, you're so desperate for this movie to be good.
It's so easy to make a good plot where you could have a secondary plot where you have it revealed that he is Usain Bolt. And 11 miles is a pleasant walk.
But he's so scared of like Yogi and the dead man that he's like, I'll just walk 11 miles away, go to a movie and play some mini golf or something. It's just it's dumb. So they proceed with the reading of the will, and of course Robert has Ted Clayton in another wing sleeping. Again, you start to think, oh, there's scheming going on.
And so Mrs. Krug is in the will, so she's mentioned, and then we have Exodus coming, and then Hans, he goes to Exodus, and he tells Exodus that he can sleep here for the night, but then Exodus says,
Where's the dead man at?
On the second floor.
Well, I'll sleep in the cellar then.
That's where Yogi is.
You mean that man at the household? Well,
no,
you give me an umbrella and I'll go
sleep
up on the roof.
It's kind of funny, but
it is kind of. I mean, it's the only comedic stuff you have in the whole movie, and and again, the only two really decent performances in this are Amisha Auer and Willie Best, but it's not enough to save the script. It's not enough to save the movie. I'm sorry. The thing is, this is the impetus for the whole movie is the will. They read the will, and the late Dr. Earlton, he leaves $50,000 plus house, effects, and all grounds to Ruth, his sole heir and only child. Okay, so Hans overhears this. He's in the next room, and he overhears it, and you could tell he's unhappy by this. Robert
also doesn't like it as well.
Yeah, he's unhappy too. Yeah. So the other part of the will is that if Ruth dies, here we
all
go.
the money gets to go to Robert.
That's
right.
right.
And then also Mrs. Krug gets a small amount of money as well.
She gets $50 a month for life. And she doesn't look like she's too happy about that, but she's not making a fuss.
And this diffused all of my Mrs. Krug is going to be the villain of this because, she's satisfied, so Hans is the villain.
Yeah. So Hans is frustrated. He wants to reveal that he's related, so that he and his mother should get a share of that $50,000. They work too long and too hard for the family, and they're treated like lessers, right? So Mrs. Krug says that she doesn't want Hans to say anything, and if he does, she'll say that he's crazy. Uncle Robert says he's tired, he wants to go upstairs. Once everybody's out of the room, it's just Hans and Robert, because Hans is kind of a servant, so he takes Robert upstairs. So they're talking, right? Now we see the scheme. So Hans says Robert is a hypocrite because Robert wants the money just as much as Ruth does, and he's just being nice. So everybody goes to sleep, and before Ruth goes to bed, she goes and talks to Ted, and, okay, this is kooky. While they're talking, and within Ted's eyesight, a painting on the wall slides over.
I thought this was interesting. However, secret passages is also a trope of the old dark house kind of thing.
Like the picture, like a painting with like holes in it where the eyes are. That's done way better in a lot of other movies.
Yeah, but there wasn't holes in this painting. No, it was just a secret passage, so they could go, oh, the ape made use of it. But no, Robert made use of it, as we'll see.
The same hand that murdered Mrs. Krug.
Well, probably. The thought is that it's probably Hans watching.
And Robert puts hair on his arm to...
No, it's not Robert. It's Hans.
It's Hans using the arm.
He has a glove. He has a...
Either way, that's confusing.
It is.
Just keep the ape. The ape gets to walk. The ape chokes her. The ape is just being harnessed by Hans and Robert. Keep it. That's good.
Yeah, but they do kind of give you a...
But they're like, no.
Yeah,
the ape does nothing.
Right. So Ruth has a premonition that something bad's going to happen. She mentions that the house used to have hidden passageways, but they were all covered up or boarded up. And you're like, okay, Bill, is that still a plot point? So we see Yogi fiddling with his cage lock, and I was like, oh, so Yogi is the killer. He can get out. So, and then upstairs, we see a hairy ape hand. It closes Ruth's door and puts out the candles. Like, oh, it doesn't quite look like Yogi, but they're trying to make it look like it is.
And they could have made this more suspenseful, but then there's no music in this one. No music in this one.
No. You can't afford music.
You can't afford music.
They spent money on a monkey rental.
So we get the biggest event of the movie. The ape comes out from beneath the headboard, and
just his arm
through the
though.
headboard.
Yeah.
And it comes out. It waves menacingly and almost chokes her, but it doesn't. And then she screams. It goes away, and then everyone comes in, and there's like, what? And then they think that nothing happened. Obviously,
Yogi has not been out of his cage, according to Hans, right?
Yeah, because he's like, oh, he hasn't been out of his cage. And it's like, what?
And this part is really, this is some bad comedy. Okay, so Willie Best is in his bathrobe, and he is standing at the top of the stairs above the cellar, and he looks down. I don't know how he sees the monkey, but he sees the monkey, and he runs, and he falls over.
And there's a polar bear skin rug.
Yes. And his foot gets caught in the mouth of the polar bear skin rug. And he's like, oh, Mr. Yogi, don't bite me on my foot. And it's just like, yeah, it's super cringy, and it's not super funny. So Ruth won't sleep in her old room. She stays up to read, right? But Mrs. Krug sleeps in Ruth's bed instead.
And Ted is trying to solve the mystery, and he might think it's Mr. Wilkes as in Robert. But no one can tell.
He goes from person to person. He goes to Mr. Wilkes.
He goes to Hans and he asks him stuff.
Yeah, there's some kind of thing with a cigar where he's like, I wonder if, and you're like, that never goes anywhere.
And then Hoagie then kills Mrs. Krug.
Yes, that's right. Yogi, the Yogi arm, kills Mrs. Krug in the bed.
And no one knows who did it. And they don't think Yogi did it because Yogi apparently has to recognize Ruth, only kill Ruth. And I'm like, why does Animal Instinct say he only has to murder one person? He doesn't care.
They go see Uncle Robert, and he is shocked to hear that Ruth is still alive. According to Ted, he said that he was feeling Robert's pulse, and his pulse stopped dead away, and I was like,
that's impossible. That is called dying.
Anyway,
so they're kind of playing a clue game and being like, oh, it's the monkey in the secret passageways with the fingers.
So that's good. So Hans goes to Ruth's room, and he finds his mother dead instead of Ruth, and it devastates him. He confronts Uncle Robert, and they blame each other for the mess up. Hans says that it was Robert's idea to do this whole scheme because once the money was his, after Ruth was dead, he would acknowledge that Hans was his son through an illegitimate relationship with Mrs. Krug.
And then a really good line that probably is the best of the line, though the acting is a little iffy, is, why didn't you tell him I was your son? And now, my mother's dead. It's all your fault. Yours and the girls. and I'm gonna kill you both. He's trying to decide something. I'm just like, is he trying to decide something?
So we go to a scene where Mr. Wilkes, Ted, and Ruth are in the living room. Ted says that he did examine Robert, and he is definitely an invalid. So you're like, okay, well, I guess he's not the one doing the killing, right? So the only possible one is the ape, according to Ted. I'm like, okay. So Wilkes goes in to check on Yogi.
And then a funny scene with Exodus happens where he asks him, hey, do you have my revolver? I'm gonna go check for it in my car. And he's like, nope, it's right here.
Yeah,
he just eats it out, and he's like, I got it right
ready.
here.
He is ready to go.
He is ready to go.
We're led to believe that Hans has killed Uncle Robert, but it kind of off screen, right? So he comes down and tells him something's wrong with Uncle Robert. So both Ted and Mr. Wilkes go upstairs to see about Uncle Robert, leaves Hans alone with Ruth. He kidnaps her and takes her downstairs with the ape and ties her to a pole in the cellar. Mr. Wilkes and Ted Clayton discover that Robert is not dead. So I guess Hans' grip is not all that great.
And they go check Hans's room only for the violin to still be playing. They come in, and it's a tape recorder. Dun, dun, dun!
There's like a shadow.
And so then they head downstairs to the cellar, where Hans is whipping Yogi into shape. And then while Ruth is sitting there tied up, and it's just like, that is a really awful plan.
He's 10 feet away. He's supposed to be whipping the ape.
Just unlock the cage.
He's supposed to whip the ape into a frenzy. The ape is then supposed to attack Ruth, I guess kill her, and make everything work. Yeah, the reason they think that Hans was the guy is because Robert kind of he kind of has a change of heart and name drops him.
And so, long story short, they solve out Hans. Hans is dealt with.
Well, he's dealt with because he's dead. He's dead, right? And so they let Ruth out of her bonds and take her upstairs, and we're left with Mr. Wilkes and Exodus, who has come downstairs to see what all the fuss was about.
And then our final line happens.
Exodus goes, "Excuse me, boss. What were they doing with one of them things around the house?"
Well, Dr. Earleton was an exponent of the Darwinian theory.
Huh?
He believed that they were our ancestors.
You mean he's related to me?
Exactly.
Well, I don't know. I had a grandpappy that kind of looked something like him, but he wasn't as active. Okay, that one won. That line won as the most cringy line of the whole movie.
Well, there are a couple other cringy lines as well that we can cover.
Do I have to explain why this one was so cringy? He was comparing subtly, or not so subtly, a black man to a monkey, okay? Boo on that.
And he's like, well, they both live in Africa, so, well, anyway. But some of them we have is like, there's a really weird line where Mrs. Krug is comforting Ruth and to get a guest room, and so she's like, Patty Krug will put you to bed in your own little room, just like when you were a little girl.
Patty Krug will put you to bed in your own little room, just like when you were a little girl.
One of the weirdest lines in the whole film.
It kind of, but I've heard worse. What are your other votes?
And we also have some things where, like, when Ruth is scared, she's like, I'm afraid, and I'm like we couldn't tell.
Yeah, no, and honestly, she keeps saying, let's leave this place, and they're like, no, it's okay, they're there.
And another one is Ruth isn't the kind of historical kind of woman.
Oh, yeah, I remember it. Yeah, the either it was written down wrong or he
misread it.
It's instead of hysterical, he said historical.
And then obviously there's like his pulse stopped completely for several beats. And again, that's impossible. So why, how, anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I am the guilty one.
I am the guilty one.
That's another one that Robert the Invalid says. He's like, at the end when he reveals that he is the villain all along, he's like, I am the guilty one. And I'm just like, lol.
Well, what was the part he said?
Wealth to youth is golden, but to age it is a milestone.
He meant millstone, like a heavy stone you put around your neck. He said a milestone, meaning a good thing. It's like a milestone. You mean a millstone?
And then finally, how about we play a clip since we recorded our reaction, how about we play my reaction to when we see the violent tape recorder.
Oh, that makes sense. It's fake.
And so basically, if you want to sum up this movie, and as we said before about they kind of hang on to the silent movie era and they're as slow as silent movies, I really do feel like they in fact are so much like that. They are literally title cards. Their acting is literally title cards. They're so used to title cards, it's just immense. So that is what you could probably get from this. So, Dad, let's jump into the next one.
Well, let me say one thing about, in response to that. Honestly, okay, we have an example with Martha Maddox, who plays Mrs. Krug. She, in The Cat and the Canary, she's very expressive and with these looks that she gives the camera. I think that because it's silent, people acted more. You know what I mean? And then once they got sound, they're just they lean on the fact that they can talk out their emotions.
Yeah.
But yet they don't do it. Anyway, I just wanted to get that off my chest. So, yeah.
The oldest and darkest and dankest house in the whole world.
Yes. Okay, this is the Old Dark House, 1932. The same year as this other movie, and
every single other movie we've been doing for the past couple of episodes.
For a little bit, yeah. But it's light years beyond. But I've been thinking about it. Are we being too hard on the monster walks because it's got low budget, or should we expect more out of our low budget movies? Even just because it's got a low budget does not mean you don't need to give it your all. I guess. Does that make sense?
I guess.
All right, so with the Old Dark House, this is a Universal Studios movie. It is, like we said before, it's directed by James Whale.
So it's of much better material than the previous one.
It is, it really is. Okay, so we begin the film on a really well-designed soundstage, okay? Lots of awesome rain effects. So it's raining, we got a car, and it's just barely making it. The three people in the car are Margaret Waverton, played by Gloria Stewart.
Gloria Stewart, yep.
Yep. Her husband, Philip Waverton, played by Raymond Massey.
Yeah.
And which I haven't seen him in too much stuff except for the upcoming movie. It's H.G. Wells. What is it?
The Shape of Things to Come.
Yeah. That's what it's based off. Also, their friend Pendrell. I'm just going to call him Pendrell. I don't remember his first name. Sorry. Played by Melvin Douglas. I haven't seen Melvin Douglas in anything, but I like him. He's a very likable character in this. So Philip is driving, and Margaret is absolutely miserable, and Pendrell's kind of sleeping in the back. He still somehow has the good humor, right, to crack some jokes about the storm and sing a little bit too. So they even try to go through some really high water, which for real, on a real tip, don't do that.
And something that you can notice about this opening, when I was just blown away by how much better it was, there's, he talks about his hat. It's so wet that there's rain dripping on his hat. And trickling on his hat. And they even show it. They have a little scene where they have a little shot where they have him indeed have water trickling down his hat. And I thought that was cool that they show the water drip off his hat. It was unnecessary, but really cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot more camera motion in this. The blocking is so much better, the composition of shots. But again, this is James Whale. This is the difference between, some guy on YouTube and Steven Spielberg. There's a big difference between the two people.
Or like William Shatner.
So Philip wants to check out the map, okay? But Margaret remarks that it's just sopping wet, okay? And there's nothing you can do to it. They go around the corner. They almost get hit with a landslide of mud, which, wonderful. They see some lights off in the distance, and they pull around the corner to check it out. And it's a nice, big old Gothic castle-looking house. They have no choice. They've got to stay there for the night. And they're just not going to be able to do anything in this storm, right? So they come up to the front door, and they knock on it for someone to help them out.
And also, one thing that I realized in this movie was, first of all, from some shots of the car, I was like, wow, the car is huge. It's kind of sus. And then later, when we get into the house, we see that the stairwell and the balcony is really big. And that's kind of sus too. So then it made me realize, oh, all the sets and props are huge. They're at least 1.3 times scale that they normally should be. That's, if you've got something to realize about this movie, it's that.
Yes. As a side note, though, there's a movie. They did a reboot of Star Trek. It came out in the 2000s, and the Starship Enterprise is a different kind. It's a slightly, I'd say, probably loads different scaling than the original Enterprise. And people were obsessed with the fact that they show inside the ship at one point, and then they started, people started measuring the window distances and all this kind of nonsense and doing the math on it, and they were saying that the scaling doesn't make sense. So I would hate to see modern audiences.
And I was the one who brought this up by talking about William Shatner. But
hey, you know what?
I mean, if
you put it in my head,
if we're gonna cover the Star Trek reboot series, which I haven't seen, it should honestly not really exist. It's very retconny.
Yeah. But you need to see it at least once, I think. All right, there's 3 movies to the trilogy. Anyway, back to this. So they're at this house that is just a front, of course. We know that, and then the set with all the staircases on it is somewhere else in California, I guess, or London. I don't know where they filmed this. They come up to the front door. Like I said, they knock on the door. The door cracks open. Who do we see but Morgan?
Who is played by Boris Karloff. It's really wild how makeup can make someone, like, almost recognizable. It's just, like, the makeup artist for this movie was kind of like a ghost makeup artist, and this was the same guy who did the one for Frankenstein. That makeup.
He also did what? He did the Wolfman.
Yeah, Wolfman. Yeah. And
also Invisible Man, possibly, I think.
And it's just like most of this makeup is just adding a beard, and then they add stuff on top.
The nose,
and
the nose,
maybe
and the forehead,
maybe a bit of forehead, yeah,
and the wig as well.
Mustache, the wig. It's just, and then they add it all together, and it's just he's unrecognizable. Kind of like something that happens with Noble Johnson.
Oh.
Those people were very witty, but not so very great as the Frankenstein people, but they definitely were witty at innovation concerning Noble Johnson.
Yes. Also, I would say, you did say he was a ghost, which is true, because Jack Pierce was uncredited. He didn't get a credit for that. James Whale is still following his previous film of Frankenstein, because he's not giving Boris Karloff any lines, really, and Boris just kind of mumbles and moans like his tongue doesn't work.
Even Welsh ought not to sound like that.
He doesn't. He's a mute character, and he doesn't have any single line at all.
We find that out later. So the door closes and opens again, and we see Morgan in full, and who motions them all in. We meet Horace Phim, played by Ernest Thesiger, who comes down the stairs. Everybody meets everybody. Then we get the hint that Horace doesn't like his sister Rebecca all that much.
And to sum up his sister Rebecca in one big gist is Miracle Max's wife. That is a big sum up because, she taunts him for being afraid, you're afraid, and that made me think, Humperdinck.
Afraid. Humperdinck. Humperdinck.
They do kind of share a personality.
Yeah.
Also, I would like to read to you one crucial detail that was put but later taken out of the intro of this movie.
Whoa.
Just quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
It is a producer's note that displays for like 6 seconds, and it says, Karloff, the mad butler in this production, is the same Karloff who took the part of the mechanical monster in Frankenstein. We explained this to settle all disputes in advance in tribute to his great versatility. However, they took this off because this is entirely untrue because he's literally playing a Frankensteinian character who doesn't speak and is monstrous and just it's entirely unnecessary. They're just like, hey, you can do other stuff too other than Frankenstein, but it's not really a lot. Too different.
I think it might have been to settle a bet. So if you had a bet with your buddy that, hey, that's that Frankenstein guy. No, it's not. Oh, see that thing at the front? It said he was. So pay me $20. I don't know. That's the only reason I could think of to do that.
So anyway, Humperdinck.
Yeah. So Horace says, my sister was on the point of arranging these flowers. And then he tosses the whole thing in the fireplace. So that shows immediately you don't even meet Rebecca yet, and you already know that he hates her. So they tell Horace that they had to stay for the night because the storm is so bad, right? And Rebecca Femme shows up and is introduced. And she's played by Eva Moore. And she is, I haven't seen her in anything, but she's fantastically memorable. She is grumpy, okay? She's super grumpy and judgy, right?
And a little deaf and, tantalizes people with Humperdinck. Yeah, that's
Yes.
literally Miracle Max's wife.
She's holier than thou is what I'm saying. Okay, so Horace is nervous about the storm and that the house could possibly wash away. There's landslide and floods. The lake has burst its banks. We're trapped. We're trapped. So Rebecca silences his fears by saying that he's an atheist and she mocks his atheism, but that the old dark house has good foundations.
And there's a lot of very religious, biblical kind of stuff, and as well in terms of sin in this movie. It's a big theme, as well as age a little bit.
Yeah.
Mostly the religious, sin. And, the foundations is a biblical reference to, Morgan even points this out. And then she was like, Morgan sees that we are built on stone and not on sand. So that's a biblical allusion.
Yeah, it is. Also, there is the biblical allusion of David and King Saul, so to speak, later on. Also, there's a thing that there's something that Rebecca says later. See, we have biblical names: Rachel, Rebecca, Saul, not Horace, which I thought was funny. Morgan is a Irish name. I don't think he's family. I have this weird.
He's a butler.
He's a butler. And then of course, Rebecca says the sins of the fathers, the sins of the fathers. There's actually, I think, a Bible verse that says the sins of the fathers will be visited upon their children.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just thought of that. Thanks for pointing out the biblical allusion. And this has been Biblical Illusion Time with William Weatherford.
So upon then, she says, "You're afraid, horse. You're afraid, aren't you? You don't believe in God, and yet you're afraid to die. You've seen his anger in the sky, and you've heard him in the night. Where's your mocking now? You might as well be afraid. Your time will come, but it hasn't come yet."
Yep, and like you said, Morgan points to the ground, and he does some signing, letting you know that it could have been washed away, but it wasn't. Philip Waverton wants to know if there's anywhere they could put the car, and they're told that they could put it in the barn. And now this doesn't sound like a plot point, but it kind of is for reasons we'll find out. So Horace and Mr. Pendrell share a drink of gin.
It's only gin, you know. Only gin. I like gin.
Horace gives a toast to illusion. Mr. Pendrell says he lets on that he's a former soldier having fought in World War I. Horace does not understand how everybody can be so calm, right? And he is very nervous. He mentions that whenever Morgan drinks, he's an uncivilized brute and he's rather dangerous. That's a hint that he's probably going to do something later, and yep, he does.
And he will be the henchman of the villain of this movie.
Yes, in a way, yes. And there's and it's an interesting relationship that they both have together. It's just kind of interesting. Margaret Waverton makes the comment that her clothes are really wet and she'd like to go change clothes. I would too. I mean, it sucks. So Rebecca takes her up to her room, and while she's changing, Rebecca says Rachel was very sinful and lustful, but Rebecca was always very God-fearing. I want to get that right. So Rebecca also seems to be very condemning and judgy.
They were all godless here. They used to bring their women here, brazen, lolling creatures in silks and satins. They filled the house with laughter and sin, laughter and sin. And I prayed and left them with their lustful red and white women. That's fine stuff, but it'll rot. That's finer stuff still, but it'll rot too.
As the mirror distorts Rebecca's face,
That's
is a
right.
very, very cool shot.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. In a way, it's like it tells the truth of what's inside, that she's twisted inside. So yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. you know what? This is what you see when you have directors that have a vision and they have something they're trying to do. They're trying to show something. They're trying to express something. Or you just have two people talking and you have a painting behind them that moves in full view. And it's just, so I don't know. I think some people are just trying to, it almost is like they're trying to get a paycheck. And I think that, and that's what Robert Strayer, I think, felt like to me in the Monster Walks. And in this one, I really feel James Whale is trying to say something. And he's trying to try to express feeling.
And it also establishes a good history of the person because Rebecca introduces herself, she was very religious in her childhood and stuff. And it's like, where on earth did we have this in the Monsters Walks?
Nope.
Nobody had, you couldn't recognize anybody. Nobody had anything interesting about them, interesting quirks, personalities, weaknesses, anything at all. History, it's just so much more fleshed out, so much better. The Monster Walks barely had any effort put into it because they needed movies out so that maybe they'll win the lottery or something, but maybe not. Mostly not, obviously.
The other thing about that is that you can't say that it would be a waste of time to flesh things out. Because this movie really, even it may move slow in a couple parts, but it's riveting, and when it moves, it really moves. And the other movie, almost the same running time. They're both by about an hour, and you can't tell me that
you can have so much better stuff in it, and there's just so much stuff that a creator can do of a director, producer, whatever that creates a movie or like a writer. That they can do to make their stories so much better. And that is really good. That is why we need to have director's cuts. That is why director's cuts are kind of important. Because the director's vision is really important. Because, he creates his story and he fleshes it out all interesting. He makes it wonderful and he puts his thoughts into paper. He sends his message and stuff. But if that is diffused somehow by maybe a couple scenes are cut, willy-nilly, maybe something else happens, maybe he has to redo his whole plot or something, just anything like that, that is very, very catastrophic to his vision, and that is why we have director's cuts, which is really interesting.
Yeah, the most famous director's cut of the last couple of years would be
the Snyder cut.
The Snyder cut.
The Zack Snyder cut, yes.
The rumor is that it's not canon, except recently Discovery bought out WB, and they are going through and they have cut a lot of movies that were in the planning that were like, okay, we don't need to do this. We need to do this. We need to, they didn't have any Superman movies on the, or they didn't have any firm idea of what they wanted to do as far as Superman movies or anything like that. And the new guy coming in goes, yeah, we're doing Superman movies, and yeah, we're bringing back Henry Cavill. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I've heard.
But there will definitely be quite a couple movies in the future, maybe, that we will encounter that the director's vision has been morphed or entirely destroyed. And that is why director's cuts are really important, and movies could be a shell without them, potentially.
One director that we will cover is Christopher Nolan, who did the
Batman.
He did the Batman, the Dark Knight trilogy, as it's known. He did Interstellar. He did Tenet. He said that there are no director's cuts of his movies because everything he wanted to be in the movie is in the movie.
And that's really great. That's a really great thing that needs to happen. And it's like, seriously, I don't know why it shouldn't be allowed to be able to make a director's cut of your movie. Just, put some work to it, put the director's cut, make the director's cut, maybe make some changes after, and then release that version, release them both separately. It's awesome. Compromises. That's perfect.
As we'll discuss later, Zack Snyder had a tragedy in his family, so he had to pull out, and they put another director in that maybe was not the best fit for his vision. But, and of course we figured that out later. But we'll talk. We'll cover that.
We'll
movie.
cover that later. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's get back to the plot.
All right.
Where Margaret, she opens up a window, and then the storm comes through, blows her away, and she can't close the window again. That's kind of stupid.
I did kind of think it was stupid. One thing, though, we got from Rebecca before she left was that she has a 102-year-old father that lives upstairs, that will come back. She says he's a wicked, blasphemous old man, but I don't know. He sounds okay to me later. Okay, anyway. So she is wearing a really nice white, very Hollywood dress when she comes back down the hallway, and I think that James Whale wanted her to look like a white flame when she's being chased by Morgan. So Margaret comes down to the dinner table because dinner's being served. That's why Rebecca left a minute ago. Horace is about to serve the food. This is a great scene. I mean, there's parts in it where they don't talk at all, and you just get this. You get so much data coming at you. It's great. So Horace is about to serve the food, which is roast beef, potatoes, pickled onions, bread, I guess. So Rebecca stops him in the middle of serving the food. She says that they need to say grace, and Horace mocks Rebecca's belief in God. This is a really dysfunctional family dinner. Horace makes a snide comment that Rebecca thanks her gods for having created Rebecca Femme and Roderick Femme
and Saul Femme, and then she's like, now you've done it. I'm gonna go whip you or something. Who knows?
Yeah, well, she shuts him down before he can finish saying Saul.
Instead, she just says the quickest prayer ever, and then gets into the potatoes. So, a thing about this movie, again, it's a very quotable line, is have a potato. Horace is just obsessed with letting people have potatoes. He's like, have a potato. It's an American invention.
He says it like 3 times, I think.
To the point that everyone had a potato and only a potato for dinner. That is, potatoes are really bland by themselves. They need something more because, they're kind of bland, the starches and whatever. But it really needs to balance out with something. As we were discussing earlier with potato oatmeal, and that's why I brought it up again.
It's full circle.
It's full circle.
So this scene is good. It's got some uncomfortable small talk, and then just watching them eat, there's just so much to see there if you're willing to look for it. One thing I did notice is that everybody is picking little bits off their potatoes, like even something as pure white as a potato has these grody parts on it, and I was like, oh, I see. Like even in a family where you think everything's all right, there's some grody stuff on it.
And so then we get guests arrive, and so Morgan comes open the door to 2 more guest people to join them and shelter from the rain.
There's someone outside.
They can't come in.
We have Gladys and Sir William Porterhouse, who's Charles Lawton. Seriously, something about this is that I did not recognize Charles Lawton at all because I had not seen him since The Island of Lost Souls, and only The Island of Lost Souls, so it's just, again, the makeup, just shaving his face is enough to just make him unrecognizable. That's amazing.
Well, see, the order in which these films that we watch them are not necessarily the order in which they came out. I think that this was his first American movie.
And then Island of Lost Souls came after, and he regrew his mustache. Awesome.
Well, either one. So Gladys Duquesne is played by Lillian Bond, and William Porterhouse, like you said, Charles Lawton. William is very talkative, boisterous.
And Gladys says "we" all the time, very, very comically. "We." It's kind of fun.
She's fun, but you could tell that it kind of annoys Rebecca, but what doesn't? And then Horace is like, okay, he doesn't know what to say. See, because they seem kind of like lower class, even though William Porterhouse, you find out he's got money.
Horace is much more on the higher end in terms of money.
Yes,
because of his higher class origins and growing up and stuff.
Well, who knows if it's higher class origins or not? It's just that they have this, this big house it's very mysterious. Like, does he really have high class origins or not? We don't know. We just have to go by how he presents himself. Kind of like this. It's very effete is the word, I guess.
So anyway, the guests introduce themselves, and they all eat dinner, and they sit around for 2 hours, literally not doing anything, and then they decide to talk a bit more about themselves and their lives, including a funny thing where Gladys is apparently an oracle due to, the woman's sense, and they ask her their fortune, I guess, who knows.
So, Gladys says her women's intuition tells her a lot of things, and she points it tries to point it at Mr. Pendrell. Horace then says something interesting that just gets totally blown by, and he says, would your intuition let you know that I'm wanted by the police? But they're like, oh, no. And so basically Horace is saying he's wanted by the cops, and we're like, oh, why?
This never gets addressed again, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, Gladys says that Pendrell doesn't quite fit into these times with factories and cheap advertising and money grubbing. And she says William Porterhouse is okay with those things, but they make Mr. Pendrell a fish out of water. So it's very interesting. She's kind of pitting Porterhouse and Pendrell against each other. In terms of, oh, you think I'm an idiot because I'm going after money, but it's kind of like, are you acting like you're better than me? So it's a little bit of a class or work ethic kind of thing.
Which they do kind of explore. This is actually interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, the monster walks, even still just talking about it is kind of boring. So now we're finally to something a lot more interesting.
Yeah, so basically, William tells an interesting story.
I do tell an interesting story.
I'm going to call him Bill Porterhouse. So Bill Porterhouse says that he had a wife at one point. He was married to a Manchester girl. The directors of his company gave a party, and he goes, okay, we'll dress ourselves really nice. I'll look nice. I'll get you this nice cotton frock. And apparently it wasn't hoity-toity enough for these people. And so they treated her kind of bad. And she was like, I'm holding you back, William, and this totally kills her, in a way. She could have just, died of a broken heart. Who knows with these stories. So he vowed that he would make himself as be a self-made man, and he would smash those guys with his success, on all their wives and everybody that wouldn't give Lucy a kind word. But he started making money, but now he can't really stop because he's good at it. But it's like this perpetual motion machine, is what I was thinking.
So then Gladys reveals that her real surname is Perkins and not Duquesne. But Duquesne is much more interesting anyway. Perkins is kind of bland. That makes sense.
But you get the thing where Pendrell keeps saying "Darling Perkins."
At least it wasn't Parker.
Oh, nice. So, okay, Gladys says that she's a former chorus girl because they're all, saying they don't have anything to hide about any of themselves. Rebecca Bim bursts in and she says that Morgan's in the kitchen. He's very drunk. He's trapped in there for now. So that comes back in a minute.
And Gladys really does kind of seem like a chorus girl kind of thing. I mean, she likes opera. She's very happy-go-lucky. She scats all the time and stuff. And she's probably living her dream out there in the chorus.
And you can kind of see why Pendrell, as we find out, you can see why Pendrell's kind of smitten with her. So they're kind of discussing by the window that Pendrell came to her defense, so she's thankful for that. And Pendrell says, "Oh, it's a good time for a little bit of whiskey. Let's go out to the car, or I'll go out to the car and get it." And Gladys just starts following him, and so they go out there.
In a nice, big, long, sweeping shot, which is really cool. It's nice to get long, sweeping shots in movies. That's really cool.
Yes, and Gladys sees Morgan in the window to the kitchen, and he does a little moaning, and he hits the window. So you're like, dude, I mean, he just shows that when, Morgan's on some booze, he feels no pain. Which,
we do realize that sometimes. There's a scene later where, one of them he's punching, Morgan, but he's literally just unfazed. He's just like, punch, 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 and it's not doing anything.
He is no selling, basically.
Unless he turns into Wreck-It Ralph and pummels those bricks, then he's done for.
Yeah, it's rough. So
I'm gonna wreck it.
He does wreck it. So so she follows Pendrell out to the barn. When they're in the car, he notices her shoes are soaked through. He does this 2 or 3 times,
and he replaces her shoes with man shoes.
Yeah, again, and he's drying her feet off.
So this is evidence that this is pre-code is due to this shoes being wet. There is a lot of feet touching, which since the code happened would be a no-no. But I mean, now we get all the feet touching we want, but when the Hays Code came in, that was a no-no thing.
Yes. Okay, so they're getting along. They're in there, just kind of chatting it up, and of course we jump scenes back over into the house where the lights start flickering. So inside the house, the light starts flickering, but Morgan's the only electrician, and he's drunk in the kitchen. I came up with a rap for that. I don't know why. So, but anyway, that's the truth. He's the only electrician. They make their own lighting there.
So then they have to go get a lamp, but Horace is afraid of getting the lamp because upstairs is the location of Paul and the 102-year-old of Saul and the 102-year-old. Well, Paul is Saul.
Well, if you want to go
Saul.
biblical, right.
Paul is Saul, but a different Saul. When Saul was good, Saul is not good at all. See, I can make a rap too.
That's pretty good. So Saul, in this, I think the allusion they're making with the name Saul is that Saul was mad. And he was jealous of David and his purity. So that's probably why they're doing the madness of King Saul.
We do hear some mad cackling upstairs as they attempt to get upstairs. They go upstairs very tentatively. They find the lamp, and then they see a door that houses Saul, but they don't quite know it yet. They just know it's bolted shut.
It is bolted, and it's got dinner plates outside of it, like they had given him food and they gathered the food back or something. So, downstairs, Rebecca Phim runs out of a next door room and shouts at Margaret Waverton that she left the window open and the rain is pouring.
But I thought the plates were out for John though at first because
you mean Roderick?
I didn't know about Saul, but sorry, John is the actor. But we'll get to him later.
Well, I'll explain the John situation. So yeah, you mean Roderick? Yeah.
Yes.
So Sir Roderick, yeah, Phim. It's possible that could have been for him, but I think in my mind I was going, it's for
Saul.
Saul.
It could be for both. Who knows?
That is true. So William Porterhouse is there, and he's like, I'll help out with the window.
After arising from bed from sleeping, and he was like, "Oh, I was just being here sleeping. What are you guys doing?" It's like, "We need the window shut." It's like, "All right, I'll go do it." And Margaret then goes on to make shadow puppets in a really unnecessary but really cool scene.
No, I don't think it is. It's cool. It's very Universal Studios.
And it's not a very necessary scene, but I really do appreciate it. It's much more of a personality to the movie versus the Monster Walks.
It's spooky because Rebecca's supposed to be gone.
Because if you have like a personality in your movie, it's really great. Like the Muppets has personality, and there's also stuff like that. But let's not make that a huge tangent.
No, what I was saying is that she moves, and a shadowy Rebecca comes out and pokes her, and she's freaked out by that. She runs outside and yells for help to Pendrell or whatever, and they doesn't get it. She comes back inside, and she's attacked by Morgan. And this is a tense scene. Morgan turns over the dining table, but Margaret escapes up the stairs, met by husband Philip. Morgan and Philip tussle, right? Wrestle, but the only thing that puts him down is a lamp smash to the chest, and he falls down the stairs. Margaret thinks Morgan's dead, but Morgan is still breathing. He's just stunned, right? He's very drunk. So Philip wants to go with Margaret upstairs to see what that voice was that was calling from behind a door. It was a very tiny voice, kind of like a child. The next scene, we're back in the car, out in the barn, with Pendrell and Gladys, and this is a really cute scene. So Pendrell's really falling for Gladys. She explains that Bill Porterhouse and her are not boyfriend and girlfriend, and Pendrell's like, yeah. Pendrell bears his heart to Gladys, and it works. He says, I was thinking I'd like to pretend that I was your lover, and that you are mine, Gladys, body and soul. I'd like to take you in my arms and hold you and press you to me very gently, very tight. And I was like, okay, buddy, you got away with words. So she says she would love that, and says she has a crazy idea that she might help him to be a useful person. He has something else he wants to ask her, but he can't ask her until the cold light of day because this night is magic, and I guess he doesn't want to mess it up. They go back to the house, and they are confronted by Bill, who's skeptical about what they've been doing in the car. And it's kind of a funny thing because he's like, "You got your feet wet, did you? Oh, did you, huh?" And it's just like, I love Charles Laughton. So,
and then when she steps away, then Pendrell tells Bill, and he confesses he tells Bill that he's going to ask Gladys to marry him. And then William Quarterhouse is like, "I think you're off your head. Do you?" "No, I don't, but I think it's probably the best days of work you've ever done in your life."
Yeah, it's kind of like there's no hard feelings, but Bill's still a little bit, I don't know about this.
And so we get the Roderick Fem scene.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's see. Bill, Gladys, and Pendrell put the table back because they have to put the table back because there's a scene with the table later. Back up the stairs, Philip and Margaret go into a room, not the double-locked one, but another one, and they see a really old man in a bed. This we find out is the patriarch Sir Roderick Fem, played by Elspeth Dudgeon, a woman in Jack Pierce makeup, but she's credited as John Dudgeon.
And so now, this is very obviously an elderly woman, but they couldn't get someone wrinkled enough and a man to be able to do this role.
No, I think they could. I think they could have, but the thing is,
elderly women are much more wrinkly than elderly men in general, I guess.
It's not just that. They wanted to have this...
Yeah, it's not just that.
They wanted it to be strange. And, there are some roles where they'll choose a woman instead of a man because there's just a strange, effeminate, childlike nature to the way Roderick's voice is. And it's a little creepy.
But you see, if Morgan is bad, I think he might open the door.
And I think if it was just a man, it wouldn't have been as creepy. If it's like, that's supposed to be a man, but it sounds like a woman's voice. It's off somehow. Roderick tells him that this is an unlucky house. 2 of his children died when they were 20, and other things happened. Madness came. They're all touched with the madness a little, except for him. At least he doesn't think he's mad. He mentioned that the biggest danger doesn't come from Morgan, but from his eldest son, Saul. Oh, that's the guy we talked...
And he is the baddest of the bad, and they watch over him, and they lock him up because he literally wants to kill, destroy, and burninate the countryside. So, and... He is Trogdor. He's a little short Trogdor. Yes, and Morgan is the counter for Saul, and he keeps him in because his strength is matched kind of with Saul, and they combat each other and counter each other.
He says if Saul were to get out, and this is kind of cool, he says he would burn the house to the ground like a burnt offering. I was like, ooh, that's...
biblical.
That is biblical, that's right. Okay, so if Morgan is feeling especially bad, he'll let him out. Roderick starts falling asleep, and then they run downstairs, and they hear cackling as they pass the area near Saul's room. And it's feared that Morgan has already let Saul out. Okay, they're all downstairs. The gang's all here. Everybody's there. Philip explains to everybody about Saul. Rebecca comes in the room, and Philip lets her know Saul's out of his room. Margaret shrieks as a hand reaches down a banister from behind the wall, but the hand's not Morgan's because the hand is still there while Morgan comes down through and passes. So that's kind of like, oh, that's Morgan's hand. Oh, wait, no, that's Saul's hand. Morgan comes down the stairs to the main area, and he has a stare down with the group. He attacks. This scene is bonkers, okay? He attacks and wrestles with all the men, Pendrell, Philip, and William, and knocking over a grandfather clock. They are all triple teaming him and breaking windows. I'm a big fan of professional wrestling, so this is awesome for me. The men are trying to trap Morgan in the kitchen, okay?
And Paul's slowly coming down the stairs tentatively.
You mean Saul?
Saul.
So Pendrell hears the cackling.
Isn't there something ominous in Paul than Saul? I don't even know. Maybe it's because maybe Paul signifies that even though he was saved, he wasn't really saved. I don't know.
Well, I like the.
There's no biblical allusion in that though.
No, there isn't. I like the S sound to Saul. It's very slithery, like a snake. So Pendrell hears cackling from down the hallway. Right, he leaves the fight to go back to the ladies. Philip and William, they have Morgan in the kitchen, right? So if Rebecca Phim motions to the ladies to go with her to hide in her room, but Gladys is not going to leave the rest of them, especially Pendrell. So basically we got Margaret, Pendrell, and Gladys in the room. Rebecca Phim locks herself in her own room, and Pendrell puts the ladies in a closet to protect them.
And so it's a one-on-one talk with Saul and Pendrell.
Saul Phim is played by Brimber Willis.
And he does them really well.
He does. He's creepy.
He makes them really creepy and a little kind of annoying, but not as annoying as the rooster in this. Oh, right, the rooster. By the way, in the barn, I forgot to mention this earlier, but when they went to go get the beer, whatever, from the car, the whiskey, there was a rooster. It was kind of like the morning, and the rooster kept crowing constantly, and I was just, by the point of its last cry, I was just like, shut up, because, well...
Did they film it during the day?
They have a farm, so they added farm noises, but from personal experience, okay, one time, or two times, in an alarm for the morning, one of the options is a rooster alarm, and so one time I set it, and I immediately regretted it. It was so annoying, and it's burned into my soul. So, learn from my mistakes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, William. This has been Learning Time with William.
And so, let's learn about Saul's history then. So, he's basically says, I'm not crazy. I'm just locked up because they're wicked. They're the evil ones. And they're just frightened of me because years ago, they said that I killed their sister Rachel. And,
No, that they killed Rachel, and he knows it.
Yeah, they killed Rachel, he knows it, and then he promised he wouldn't tell, but then he kept him up there anyway, and, he says that Morgan beats him, and then Saul says not to leave him.
Yeah, Pendrell says he's going to go find the other guys. He says he'll be back, but Saul has this little sneer, and you're like, uh-oh. Okay, he's lying. He's not. He is the crazy one.
But the person who's also lying is Pendrell, trying to be like, Saul's friend who's like, I really am interested in your story I have to tell.
Yeah.
He will tell a story.
Saul wants to tell Pendrell's story, but he keeps stopping because he's curious as to what's in the cupboard, right? So we know it's Margaret and Gladys in the cupboard. Pendrell has to distract him and listen to the story. And he keeps looking at this poker next to the fire because he wants to hit him. Saul gets a big steak knife off the ground.
You might say he's playing a game of poker.
Exactly. He kind of is. He said, I've made a study of flames. Flames are really like knives. They're sharp and cold as the snow, and they burn like ice.
As he brings out one himself and then attempts to stab.
Yeah, and he tells them the story of King Saul and David, and as an illusion. And in the story, there's a part where Saul actually throws a javelin at David. So in real life, he throws the knife at Pendrell,
making a biblical illusion, which is pretty cool. And so then commits the fight.
They do. They fight.
On the banister of the stairs. It's really epic. He sets fire to the tapestry on the wall, or like a wallpaper or something that floats off or something, like a banner. And he then sets fire to it, and they begin a very, very, very awesome fight, ending with both of them falling, one of them injured, one of them dead. Guess who it is? It's Saul. Saul is dead.
Well, Saul may just be, completely out of it. I don't know.
He's unconscious. Then Morgan breaks through the wall, and at this point, Dad made the funniest joke in the world at that then. We will play the clip here. It's just absolutely wholesome.
Kool-Aid! Yeah, Kool-Aid.
Yeah, it was really funny. So
Morgan hears the ladies in the cupboard, and he opens it, and they scream. And Gladys wants to go to Pendrell, who's hurt, right? And Morgan is just in the way. And Margaret grabs her wrist to stop her. And Morgan stops her, and she pounds at his chest, wants to be let pass. And he really grabs her shoulder like hard, right? Chucks her aside. And Philip and William are still in the kitchen. They're locked in there. They're trying to get out. Morgan goes after Saul and takes him up to his own room.
And then the house turns out fine. It didn't get on fire. And then the movie ends with the proposal of Pendrell to Gladys. And it's very cool. The house has turned out fine. Congratulations. This story is happy ends. Thank you. The night that you feel strong welling in your body. Return to start, begin again.
Well, the part that I like is as soon as it's daytime, Horace just comes up. He's like, goodbye. So happy to have met you. Dude, yeah. He's like, this was interesting. And honestly, the thing I like about this movie is, it's not earth-shatteringly iconic. It's just like
it's just much better than The Monster Walks.
No, it's not just that. It's just good. It's like you don't all have to have big giant monsters or stuff like that for it to be a spooky, interesting story.
But also in the commentary, we also get that Gloria Stewart said that this was her favorite movie that she worked on. Or probably besides Titanic, obviously.
Besides Titanic, right.
Besides Titanic, but yeah, but that would be very valid because, this was a pretty great movie after all.
It is, and it's a hidden gem too because as we mentioned earlier in this episode, they had copies of it around, or it was going to be out. But I think in 1960s they did Hammer did a version of it, and they
had the rights, and then Universal lost the rights, and so then they couldn't release it, and it was superimposed the later version. So no one knew the previous version until they found it again.
They found it. They found it, and it was a miracle, and it was in quite good shape. And then they improved upon it even after that, and that's why we have this. That's why are able to see this movie in such high quality as we do.
Yeah. So to end off this very, very long but very, very worth it podcast concerning the monster in The Monster Walks, you kind of mentioned your thoughts about this, but I think that you thought that Hans was a monster. He was the monster that walked, and
he's monstrous. I mean, you could be.
I do not really think so because he's more of a villain. He's a villain in my eyes. He's a regular person who has motives to be evil. And, there are, we've seen a lot of monsters figures, and we've seen a lot of monsters, but he's not really that.
So do you think that he is justified in kidnapping a woman?
I mean, you can definitely do something that's unjustifiable, but that's not being a monster. Monsters are entirely different. Villains are much more fitting for him, because monsters are entirely just... their soul is just carved out kind of thing, but he's not really like that.
Oh, you think he could have been, redeemed?
Maybe, who knows? But yeah, that's the end of the podcast.
Yeah, that was a good episode. I'm glad you were able to see the old dark house, but we were also able to see The Monster Walks. There are going to be some cheesy movies that might be so bad they're good. I think there's some aspects of movies that make them so bad they're good, but The Monster Walks just didn't have it, and that's a shame because if the acting was cheesier and more over the top, it probably would have done better. Also,
and our reception, we put that all in the previous segment. If you haven't done that, go listen to that part. But yeah, that is how we feel about these movies. These movies are pretty great. Our next movie is going to be The Vampire Bat. We mentioned this before in saying that
it had Dwight Frye, and it was and Lionel Atwill and Fay Wray, and it's directed by Robert Strayer, the same guy who did The Monster Walks.
Melvin Douglas, who was also in this movie. And
Does it have Melvin Douglas?
Yeah, that's.
I just said that I didn't see him in anything else, but yeah, okay, fantastic. So we get some actors we've seen before and some who we haven't seen yet, but will see in the future.
So the Vampire Bat, is it also a mystery film, or is it? It
Yes.
sounds more like a horror film, but
It's both. It's a mystery and a horror film.
That's interesting, because that's what we've been doing this episode, and I thought this was going to be a one-off, but I guess we're doing it again. And we might do it again and again and again a couple more times. Who knows? Mystery and horror are very good combinations. So.
The 30s and 40s have a lot of mystery and horror in them. Also, later on, after that, we get to I Promised You This movie, and we're going to see it. It's a very, very influential as far as some different aspects of it, which we'll see. Special effects, and also for, I think, camera.
Which is King Kong.
Yes, but before that, it is... It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with Frederick March.
We have decided that instead of just skipping... We had like a silent version, this one, and a 1940s version, and... We got rid of both of those initially, but we have decided to reinstate them in our plans. So, after the Vampire Bat, we will do Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1931. And that'll be really great.
It's not silent. There is a silent one.
It's definitely not silent, but that's...
But this yet...
Well, that's why I was saying there was like a 19...
Right, there,
20-something
1919,
version.
yeah, 20.
1919 version.
We'll still do...
We did not do.
No, we'll still do the 1940s Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because I would like to kind of compare and contrast them later on. Like when we watch that one, we'll think back and remember this viewing of it and kind of compare them and see where they, which one shines, which one's better, so which one we prefer. So anyway,
for now, see you later.
See you later. Have a good one, and curl up with a nice book in front of a fire and stay away from really scary houses.
And try some oatmeal flavors.
No, please no. And have a potato.
Goodbye.
Don't forget to open your third eye and telepathically message us at cinefanpod@gmail.com. Set your chronoscope dial to the future setting and peruse cinematicfanpodcast.wordpress.com. Hunker over your ham radio as your keen ears listen for the ghostly voices tweeting on our Twitter @CinematicFanta1. Exchange all of your money into Republic credits and donate at our Patreon page at patreon.com/cinefanpodcast. Ending transmission now.